drink. Sorry, guys. And hopefully all is well. I'm trying to see about the signal here. Everybody should have a pretty decent signal. Prayerfully so. Not sure if you do or if you do not. But hopefully everybody can see and hear me all right. It's been a minute since I've been at this location. So just trying to make sure everything's all right. I think we got the signal up. Can everybody see and hear me all right? Yes, no, maybe so. Yes, no, maybe so. Well, hopefully so. Shalom, shalom. Let's go ahead and get started. The words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart be acceptable in Yahweh's sight. He is our strength and our Redeemer, and it is in His name, which is His authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, reject, and protect. Today's message, Aman. Hola, mi nombre es Kofi, ¿cómo está? Bonjour, je m'appelle Kofi, ça va? Ni hao, namaste, osayana kitabuya, Ohio. I see you, minute, wagwan, comme ça, mina, aloha, ciao, ensemble, aqua abba, madase, etc. Jambo, mimini Kofi, ni lefra kukutan the way, boker tov, boker tam, grand rising, greetings, wakwak tap, walakala cham, yahaba, anaib, kovai, kochelet, et servant to Christ, mashalam chi. Hello everybody, I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant to Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time, but being the voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you. We should have everything up on our on the schedule that was out for the week. Main things on the schedule that need to be looked at is, I believe the children have Spanish class tonight, this afternoon at 1 p.m. New York time. A recording was sent out, by the way, to the children from last week, so you should be able to see what's going on from last week and have that ready to go. We then have at 7 p.m., if I'm not mistaken, 7 p.m. New York time, we might have, or I'll double check it actually. We'll double check it. We have Hebrew characters coming up again. I'm not sure if that's tonight or tomorrow, but looking to schedule for that. If it happens, it will be around 7 p.m. New York time. At 8 p.m. New York time, we'll be live on TikTok and YouTube as well. TikTok, Kofi_42, not Kofi_43. And then from there, we have our graft-in session. So we'll be having our final graft-in session, not ever, but the final one for at least a few 2 to 3 weeks, as we get ready for prayer services to be abundant next week, and as we get ready for what's the other one? I apologize. Prayer service, and as we are getting ready for VBS, which will be coming up. And also, too, remember, we need sponsors for the children. So if you're willing to sponsor a child, we still have plenty of children that need sponsoring. We've started doing so officially. But just in case you're somebody who needs help or would like to help with that, we're asking you persons don't mind donating $50 donation per child. You'll be given a number, and the parent will be aware of the number that goes with the child. Once we have somebody that is willing to be a sponsor, it will go at random. Everything's going to be at random so that nobody feels like we're going after one child first, etc., etc. But anybody who gives, we're asking that you help us with donations for a child, so we might be able to get them what they need for VBS, and then basically, which is Vacation Bible School. So if you'd like to donate, we have quite a few of us that are going to be on the list, somewhere around 20 or so. So if you'd like to go ahead and give, we thank you for giving, and we'll start working towards our children being taken care of. Prayerfully, you could help us out with that, and we would be able to hopefully start sending stuff out around the 22nd to 23rd at the very latest. All right, so thank you in advance for persons who are willing to help us with that, as well as any kind of offering, donations, etc., that you give, including financially or really money-wise, things of that nature, but also, of course, your gifts, your talents, your effort, energy, those things that persons put in effort-wise behind the scenes. We are very much so appreciative of all that you guys put in. Thank you for coming over from Thursday Rising Prayer as well. Thank you for those who were with us for Kung Fu yesterday. We just thank everybody. We appreciate you so very, very much. You weren't able to get in. Okay, well, we're going to see if maybe we can do a meeting with just us and the ones that are going to be doing teaching. So we held off on some of the stuff. But no problem, Sister Carla. No problem. We'll get it together. Still need to meet with y'all and meet with the elders and then see what we're going to be doing. But thank you, everybody who's been coming in. I know we've been putting a lot of work in. Still a lot of work to do. But that's what we're here for, to move as a family unit. And we're grateful and thankful to everybody for being on with us. We appreciate you all. And we hope that the word continues to help. So today is Q&A. We're going to get ready to go into Q&A. We'll do our Bible pledge as well. And then we'll get ready to go into Q&A. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, today is the day you take the lead. We did have some questions, comments, and concerns that were sent in prior when we posted in different places about Q&A. So thank you for those who did so and took care of it and wrote stuff out on Patreon. Thank you to those. Some of you looked and found some stuff on Facebook. We put it on YouTube. We put it on TikTok as well. Matter of fact, you know what? I didn't, last time I checked TikTok, I didn't see any questions on there. Doesn't mean that there are not. If we don't get to all of them, by the way, if your question didn't get seen by me or by somebody else, thank you to those who were helping me to find the questions and stuff, make sure that we had them together. If you had questions that I didn't get to today or that I missed, or even those of you who are live, you can put your questions in live as well. We're going to start with some of the ones that person sent in, but you can send your questions in live as well on all the platforms. Or if you're listening to the podcast, you can always send them in the comment, or if you listen to the recording at some point on Facebook, YouTube, you can always type in your questions, and as I see the notifications pop up, I will do my best to either get back to you right there on the spot, or maybe just add it to the next Q&A, or try to see if we can put it in the live session somewhere if it is possible. All right, but today, thank you, family. We appreciate you. We're going to go ahead and get ready to get started, and then we'll get into these questions for today. Once again, remember, we're doing Thursdays and Fridays every other week now. So we have 2 days of being able to answer questions. So if you have a question or something you'd like to get to, you feel like your question wasn't answered correctly, or maybe you weren't on, and your question, to be able to make sure that I got the specifics of your question correct, feel free to go ahead and contact us. We'll get back to everything. But we'll go ahead and get ready to get started. If you can, rise to your feet in reverence of Yahweh's word. And be ready for what Yah has to say, and say our Bible pledge with us, and we'll get ready to get started, or however you're able to reference the word of Yah. Thank you so much for doing so in advance. Let's say shalom to everybody before we get started. How you doing, Sister Michelle? How you doing, Minister Willie? How you doing, Sister Carla, Sister Nate, Sister Bet, Britt, 59 Grow, Cultural Prospect. Thank y'all for being on. We appreciate you. Thank you for being on. We have Zinku, Troy, Melissa, Ness, Jamal, Akut Deborah. Akut Deborah, how you doing? Natural Ya, Jennifer, Robert, Itazuki, Airbase, I don't know how to pronounce it. Forever Changing. Hot Wheels, Josh, Cornell, Sister Michelle, Brother Dennis, everybody come on in. Sister Deborah, Lottie Dottie, everybody, Sister Taylor. If I miss you, charge it to my head, not to my heart. We appreciate you once again. Also, those of you who are coming over from Thursday Rise in Prayer and other places, we thank you so much for spending some time. You did not have to spend today with us, but you did. And since you did, we are excited to be able to prayerfully give you something that helps to continue to expand your horizons and get you to where God has promised you would be before the foundations of the world. Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into this. Prayerfully, everybody's ready. You can put your right hand in the air, your Bible, your device, and just repeat after me. This is my Bible. This is my sword. And this will I trust. For Yahshua is Lord. No sword of God shall ever be heard. For this is my Bible, and this is Yah's word. Hashem Yechavach, Aman. Which is Yechavach Shem, his name, his authority. Let it be done unto us. You may be seated or go back to what you were doing in the presence of the Most High. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Let's get started. How you doing, Sahara? How you doing, Sister Mignon? Everybody, we appreciate you. So, today we're going to start with some questions that we got on Patreon. And we'll make our way around. Once again, if there's questions, comments, or concerns, or even things that I'm saying in the midst of that you'd like to ask questions about, this is what Q&A is. We have 2 days, but I still have to make sure that we're getting everything together because we do get quite a few questions on here in here. So, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being on with us. We appreciate you. Alrighty. So, first question up. Doing well on this day. Praise God. How you doing, Brother Rodney? So, first question up. That we had. Praise God. You double screen. Okay. First question that I have up. How do you fear what persons put out in the universe, or how do you feel when what persons in the universe put out in the universe, when many are not prepared for blackouts, etc., or have the funds? All right. So that's the connotation, the feeling of it. Remember, there's denotation and connotation. So everybody's putting out a lot of stuff. Everybody's telling us be prepared in this time, be prepared in that time. Right? What's going to happen? Every time there's an earthquake, it means that it feels like somebody's preaching Yahshua is coming back. Every time there's some kind of frustration, it feels like persons are ready to go against what Yah says. Persons are consistently changing everything. So how do we get to a place, if I'm not mistaken, right? I guess the question is, what should we really more so that I guess the whole thing of the question is more so like, all right, in all this stuff going on, there's a lot of things happening. We're not prepared for blackouts. We're not prepared to fish. We're not prepared to feed ourselves, right? So how do you prepare for that, or how do you feel about all these different things? So my feeling about the different stuff is I'm going to steer away from that somewhat. I'm going to try to answer that intellectually, because my feeling on it or my opinion on it might not or does not really ultimately matter. I will say this, though, as far as how I feel like a lot of others. It's very scary. I'll hear quite a few teachings that get blended together. The teachings don't even agree with each other, but persons are just, trying to pick and choose, or something a lot of persons do. We pick and we choose which stuff we would like to have, rather than saying what is our standard or a prism that we see everything through. So there is a lot to be said for the fact that we should be scared. Just think about it in Israelites, right? When we had the North Carolina meeting, Minister Yosef, and some of us were speaking, and he said something very true. One of the things that's difficult in this walk, this following of the way, this walk of the way, is that in all the stuff that's happening, there's so many different persons who are like, follow my doctrine, follow this, follow that. Well, what I'm saying is true. What everybody else is saying is false, et cetera, et cetera. And so it gets difficult, in all honesty. That's why I say, like, one of the things that I take pride in is the Jenikriat role. Morach is great too. Don't get twisted. I'm a teacher, right? It's one of my gifts. Might be my greatest gift, not sure, but it's one of my gifts. That being said, as a teacher, right? If I'm teaching somebody's prism, I'm always teaching somebody's culture. I'm always teaching in somebody's tongue. I'm always teaching in somebody's language, right? So as a teacher, if we're being honest, right? If we're talking about the teacher, it's difficult to even teach, because there's so many different things that you have to actually look for, and so many different things that are cultural, so many different lines that are there specifically. Even if you talk about the Bible, with the Balaam doctrine, literally designed to put Israel down. If you talk about the Bible, Psalm 123 verse 4, to make you at ease with you being ostracized or put on the bottom, being scorned. So there's a lot of different things that are put out there. Many of them actually put out there strategically to make sure that you believe a lie. I think we should talk about that as well, if we're gonna be honest. Many things that persons are coming up. Many times when I get stuff sent to me, or persons are like, hey, I try my best not to go down the route of it, because it kind of breaks some person's will. But I don't think persons even know, like, how much stuff are lies and principles that we build stuff on. Or persons that built things on, and they don't want to give up their power. How you doing, big brother Charles? Big brother Charles. Shalom, peace to you. Hopefully you and Sister Monica are doing well, right? So, in this, I don't think persons realize how much stuff we're fed that's just straight up false. For example, how many news stories have been fed to you don't know that actually are made up. Some of them are made up and persons have found that they never happened. Or parts of news stories, right? I used to teach until a couple years ago or a year ago, even maybe, but I think it was a couple years ago that I stopped, where it was brought to me by I think it was Brother Vincent actually, told me that the story that happened, so if you guys remember Columbine and the Columbine shooting and everything, and when the Columbine shooting happened, they said there was a bunch of stuff, there were a bunch of myths that came out of that, including there was a girl who was in there who said that she believed, or everybody knew she was a Jesus freak or whatever. She believed heavily. They came up to her, they put the gun to her head, they said, "Do you still believe?" She said, "Yes, I do." They pulled the trigger and she died, and come to find out that was a lie, right? So many persons have taught on that, preached on that, showed how that shows. Now, it doesn't mean that somebody has not had that type of faith, but her in particular, there's a lie, right? So there are also lies that persons do to keep their stuff in order. For example, Farrakhan, however you feel about him, what I'm about to say is a lie that he's told, which is he came up with it. Now, why? Because it was supposed to be Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad was getting things together for Malcolm X. Malcolm X then basically is quieted down because he actually kept the character of what Elijah Muhammad said, and Elijah Muhammad's question was in question, especially when he realized Malcolm knew about what he was doing with these little girls and stuff. If you don't know, Elijah Muhammad was married to, or what, not married to, but he basically had like 9 wives going on at the same time. He had his main wife, and then he had picked up all these other wives or side chicks, and they would take them and hide them away from society, so nobody knew he had them, and had all these other children, right? So, long story short, he was always afraid Malcolm would out him, and then when they split apart, they were coming to take his life, and they were saying bad things about Malcolm just to make him look bad, and so Malcolm finally started telling the truth. Right, so then once he passed away, his son was supposed to take over. His son said that you guys don't even follow what the actual Muslim way is, and he said, "We're done with it." Farrakhan came eventually down the road and took the stuff from his son. So, right, and more than not even, well, allegedly had a big role to play with the death of Malcolm X, right? Who Malcolm X was his teacher. So a lot of weird stuff going on. Anyways, long story short, though, Farrakhan is now in control after all that, and he needs everybody to have that go away. So Farrakhan started telling lies, including that he is the Messiah come back, and use the Quran to back up that he is the Messiah come back, right? This is so you have a whole lifestyle and religiosity based off of a lie, right? So you have a whole lifestyle, right? So I'm saying all that to say a lot of persons don't even realize a lot of religion that they serve, so-called religion, because religion really just means what a legion of people repetitively do. But you'll see a lot of people start preaching a certain way. When you look at even a Christian or a biblical person, or even a follower of the way. If you're a follower of the way and you don't know about Yahweh ben Yahweh, be careful, because a lot of these persons, especially the older Hebrew Israelites, right? Especially any of them, if they came from down south and started making their way to places. But a lot of the Hebrew Israelite leaders that have started all these different sects, SECTS, these different sections of faith, they were under Yahweh ben Yahweh. And you need to study Yahweh ben Yahweh, who said that he was the Messiah come back, right? So when they say they're talking about the Messiah, you gotta ask yourself, what Messiah? Is this a thing of control? Yahweh ben Yahweh and them were taking persons' lives. Hebrew Israelites, often Hebrew Israelites, they were forcing women to lay down with them. They were teaching young girls that they should lay down with Yahweh ben Yahweh, that he needed to make sure he had a seed and as many women as possible, and they could be his Mary type stuff. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff that was going on, right? So somebody will take, if you're not careful, somebody will take the thought process of the Most High, and they'll try to use it to manipulate you, right? Look at, in Christianity, the guy from Baltimore who made his way down to New Birth, Pastor Jamal Bryant, right? He went down to New Birth, and when he went down to New Birth, what happened with him in New Birth? When he was in New Birth, he started saying a whole bunch of stuff, really. I'll focus on this. He started giving sermons to show why it was okay for women to have as much sex as they wanted and not be chaste, and also to say, right, so you don't get on their body count. right? That's a leftist thing. But also, he started talking about abortions and how that was okay. Excuse me. That A word that rhymes with extortion. Almost, they got me. Right? So he started teaching on that. When he starts teaching on that, right, and teaching that up, now there's a bunch of persons who are using so-called biblical principles to be able to tell other young ladies and young men why you should not feel bad when taking the life of a child, when the Bible clearly states that one should not take the life of a child. And then they call it, just like we allowed everybody else to, with all these other things. They said, hey, that's Old Testament. You just only worry about so-called New Testament. Well, now they're saying, well, the law that says not to take a baby's life is Old Testament. But we're in so-called grace. You see? So it becomes very difficult, right? That's why I'm very, you can call me dogmatic if you want. I believe I'm very much so into keeping the principle, the original, the origin, changing it as little as possible, or if we are changing it, we're changing it the way that the Bible even says that we should not change it, but that we should use it if we're in the land of our captivity, but still be prepared that in the land of our captivity, the goal is to be free, right? And so all those things that you're saying are, you know, the question that you're asking is extremely important because, well, where, you know, Hebrew Israelites are arguing over where is Israel. So if we're supposed to go back on ships, which is not exactly what the scripture is saying, that we're going to get back on slave ships and the same slave ships that brought us in, because if that's the case, if it's the same slave ships, they're in the water, or if somebody wants to say, well, no, we're going to have better ships, we're going to have the Navy ships, they're going to bow down to you, but the word tells you that the Satan is not bowing down to you, he's here to fight you, right? So when you're talking about being shipped back to Israel, really it's talking about being into freedom and coming back together, not being scattered, right? But even in that, if you believe you're going to a physical Israel, that becomes problematic, because how can you make sure the persons know where to go when some of us are being taught that Israel is in Africa? Some of us are being taught that Israel is actually where it is, which is still in Africa, but it's not called Africa anymore. You didn't know that Africa, Asia, and Europe were all considered to be one continent, right? And they still should be. So there, and if you go to Israel, you'll see that it says on the tectonic plates that you're still in Africa. That being said, right, persons are like, is Africa in Africa? I mean, is Israel in Africa? Is Israel in Israel? Is Israel in the United States of America? Right? Which, if you don't know that Mormons started that whole thing, you're off on that too, right? So it's a lot, you're right, a lot of persons are like quoting that, but that was something that Mormons taught. That was something that Mormons took, and they tried to lie and say in the Book of Mormon that they had mixed with the Native Americans, and the Native Americans basically took them out, and so the only persons left of the original white Israel would in fact be Native Americans, and even they were taken back, but they believed that their God, their Mormon Jesus, has a plan through Joseph Smith, who he himself is supposed to be on a higher level. Persons don't know this, but their Joseph Smith is actually higher than Jesus. And they actually believe when Joseph Smith gave his life, which he was off by his own people, but they believe when Joseph Smith gave his life for them, that is what has actually saved them. Not the sacrifice of Jesus, of so-called Jesus Christ. Right? So you'll see like a lot of different stuff, and it's difficult to keep up. I get the question. I just want to put that out there that I really get the question, because if we're trying to follow all this stuff, it becomes really difficult. So that's why I say I'm very big about culture and prism, right? I know where stuff comes from because of culture and prism. I study and I research culture and prism, right? Or at least I study through a prism that only allows me to see things as far as like Yahweh's culture of Israel, things like that first. And then once we see that, then we can operate differently. So that being said, how do you deal with it, or how do you respect? So once again, my stuff is to come through the prism now. I've been blessed to have Yahweh direct me, kind of tunnel vision, and have me sit at the feet of some very great persons, and even just be led by Holy Spirit in a lot of different ways as far as my lane and study, to focus on our story, or what some of you would call even his story, because his story helps to validate these things as well. So for me, when I'm studying something, once again, like even with the language stuff, when persons argue, I don't like to get into the dialects and all that, because it's just dialects. That being said, when people be arguing back and forth on all this stuff and how do you pronounce and this and that or whatever, right? I know it because I go, oh, okay, I know Aleph is a modern Hebrew character. I know that Alav is the original. I know that there was no I sound. So if somebody says Ifrit for Hebrew, I know, matter of fact, I know you're talking about a West African dialect because I know that's where it came from. Ifrit came from West Africa. Ifrit, right, came from West Africa. Igbo came from West Africa because they were calling, because the persons who were coming into Africa were looking for Negroes and called them eventually Hebrews, and the persons who are now Igbo, right, before that, they got that name because they started hearing Igbo, but started hearing Igbo. But Hebo, right, Hebo is what they thought that the so-called white man was calling them. And so they started to call themselves eventually down the road Igbo, right? But I know that because I've studied enough culture, right? So the prism that I'm coming through, and thank y'all for the love, is one that directs me, right? It's like when I be talking about all this stuff, you know, I messed up last time because last time we were outside, we didn't have any signal, right? But let me see if I can, I don't know if y'all, this will be my base. I tried to make this point before, last time I did, and I didn't have, and I ended up not having, so I'm going to try and make my point here, right? This is my bass, this sound right here, yeah. Let me make this a little clave. So I got my bass and my clave, right? Now, if you don't recognize the clave, so clave might be something that you hear when you're listening to a song and you hear right, you hear that, or you might hear that as a clave, or let me try and do it like this. I need something else. But you might recognize that, right, as your clave. I need my drums up here. Well, anyways, I'll try to make my snap count. Hopefully you hear so that, right? This is clobbing. You hear that? That's clobbing. So now if I'm doing West Africa and I were to hear that clobbing, if I were in West Africa or if I was anywhere in the world and I heard this right here, I would know that that's West Africa, right? Like, because of the dialect. And that's what I be telling persons, like, if you learn language, you learn, it's like music is language. You know, as a former, well, as a musician, I guess I can still play, but I don't get to play that much anymore. But, you know, but if I hear this right here, if I go from this, or, right, that's at West African. If I hear this, that's also West African, but that's more modern. If I hear this right here, then when I hear that, I know, oh, okay, I'm dealing with Caribbean, could be Afro-Cuban, right? Could possibly be a little bit of Dominicano, Puerto Ricano, right? Some Haitian, Haiti in there, right? All because of the clave and the bass, right? If I slightly change the clave, sorry, then I'm going down to South America, right? Something that's slight, something that's simple. It's like an accent. It's like a different thing, right? But West India, kind of the same thing. India has a lot of African type of stuff because a lot of Indians are Africans, a lot of Africans are Indians, but, you know, you're not supposed to admit that stuff, right? And they might have more of the, you know, you know, with it, but you're still going to hear the, you're still going to hear that type of beat, right? So I can tell dialect, right, just by what I'm hearing. Or if somebody, it's just like when somebody's speaking and you hear somebody do certain things with their words, you can tell what part of the United States of America more than likely they were raised in, even if you don't know where they're from, right? So I should be able to, so what happens is I look through the prism of an original culture. So if somebody's speaking a language, I can hear, oh, okay, this is where you would have picked that up because that's where these sounds come from. That's where these words come from. That's even still today, if you travel some of these places, how they speak, I can hear that's Yiddish. I can hear that's Germanic. I can hear that that's a mix of many. I can hear if it's Khazarian. I should be able to hear if it's Ashkenazi, right? There's a lot of different things, right? I can hear if it's Negro, you see, because of that. So that's a prism. Also, too, one of the things that helps, too, is I look through the prism of Yah. So let's go to the world. or I'm sorry, the earth, the so-called earth, right? A lot of us have been taught through the entirety of our lives, and matter of fact, thought persons were stupid or felt we were stupid, one or the other, when persons have this discussion about the earth, and the earth being what? The earth must be round, but it has to be round like a ball, or it has to be flat, so it must be flat like a pancake. And the Bible never discussed the earth having to be round. The Bible never discussed it being round, nor did it discuss it being flat. The Bible tells us about creation and tells us about things very simply. So somebody comes and they say, "Oh, you're wrong, and you're a flat earther, and yada yada yada," right? You said you played drums in the club for more than half your life, didn't know or could play drums. Oh yeah. Well, I'm more percussionist, but I can get down a little bit on the set, on the drum set for sure, right? Um, and thank you. Today is Q&A. Shalom to everybody. Peace, peace, peace. Thank you for being with us. It's Q&A today and tomorrow. We're going over some of the stuff and setting the stage for some of the things that we have on our list. But yeah, it's very important for us to see that, right? That we can see specifically that we have all these different things in our walk, right? And that we'll deal with these different things. So I looked through the prism. So for example, going back about the earth by now, this is why I tell you, whenever you've seen persons think we're lying about this, but they don't show you the truth. For example, they're finally having to admit over and over again. This is something that's been known, but they finally have to admit to you over and over again the Bible is correct. The prism that we look through about the earth. What do you mean, Pastor Kofi? Well, as far as the truth, the earth itself is not round like a basketball. Never has been, right? Some of them will try to tell you it started like it was round because now they have to try to say what they were teaching. Hey, how you doing, Shalom, Brother Ali? This is Sylvia, if you're on. You said, what about Nasa, meaning to deceive? It does mean to deceive. It Avda in Hebrew. So yeah, so that's a very poignant point too, right, as far as NASA. But if you look at the earth, they're finally having to admit, because a lot of persons don't know this, if NASA, or really any of these programs, but NASA has specifically told you, anything that they've ever been part of, you've seen from space, that means if you're using satellites that are theirs, etc., or satellite, that are partnered with them. How you doing, Sister Donna? They've admitted this, decades ago. And anytime that you look through any picture that they've given you, it's always been changed. So you don't know what space looks like, or at least can't trust it because they keep telling you this stuff. The reality is it's always changed. If you've seen any picture, right, from space, unless you've been able to get some person that you know and trust, and these persons are showing you directly, or you're able to do this stuff yourself, right, outside of, obviously in the telescope you can look up to a certain degree, but you're not able to look up with the same, unless some of you have the money like that, you're not able to see some of the stuff that they say that they're showing you from space or showing you from different things. But they have admitted that anything that you see has to be modified. Right? So you already see, so anything that you've seen has been modified. That means anything you've been taught has been modified. Now, but they'll admit to you that the earth is not a ball. Now, all you've ever seen is the earth is half a ball, or the earth is a ball. First of all, if you ever see a video or a picture of the earth in full where you can see it from on top, and you can see it on top, and you can see it lit up all around, you should know automatically that you cannot see the earth lit up all around, especially from their diagrams, because that means that the sun would have to be in a position where the whole earth has no darkness, and that's never really the case, right? There's not a case that we know of, at least, where the earth supposedly has no darkness. But they will admit to you the earth is not round like a ball anymore. They will admit that the earth is flatter. It is not flat like a pancake. It is kind of ovular, but the edges would kind of be flat, or at least it'd be rounding out, flattening out. Even if you believe that the earth spins, if something is spinning over and over and over again, just like a tires expand, the earth expands. Right, so even if they believe that the earth is spinning, it's getting faster and faster and faster and not slowing down, they have to believe at some point, right, that it's going to explode. And also at some point, if it gets faster and faster too, according to them, then your days should be numbered, which the Bible also says as well, that there is an end to this earth. But I won't go there right now. But I'm just saying, I look through a different prism. So when somebody finally goes, oh yeah, the earth's not round, it was never a big deal for me. Getting back to the question, right? The question of how do you deal with this stuff, or how do you see all this stuff coming in? I look at it through the prism. Everything's got to be directed through that funnel, right? So I look through the funnel to see what's going on, right? The funnel of the word. And anything that's outside of the funnel of the word, I start to look at it within itself, but I have to separate it. So if somebody tells me, for example, there are, things we've talked about and touched on before. If somebody tells me that there are neutrons, we just can't see them, but there are neutrons, I know that to be a theory, right? It's not part of the theorem. The kingdom theorem is different than theory. Theory means it may or may not be. It's something that we're using as a stopgap until we can get to something else. A theorem is a way of life. So the kingdom theorem shows me that, all the stuff that they're making up because they're trying to say that energy has to turn into mass and mass has to turn into energy. And if you can't find it, then something's wrong, or it goes to a neutral space that we just don't know how to get to. That's somebody's theory that was broken, but then coming up with another theory to be able to try and make it better, right? But the kingdom theory tells me that Yah can add or take away whatever he chooses, right? Which means that he's not wrapped up in that, nor should I be wrapped up in that. Right, so when I see this theory of a neutron and somebody's trying to tell me something isn't there, I knew not to believe it. And then finally, when I start studying and researching, it's actually easy for me to find where these 5 Italian, not brothers, but 5 Italian men that were really great friends. Some of them were boys at the time. Come up with a theory to try and hide the fact that they can't. They've actually disproven a long time ago, 100 plus years ago, right? Really, but they've disproven that. Protons and electrons have to become energy or have to become mass through their explosions that they were doing when they were making their first big bombs. And they were isolating protons and neutrons and blowing them up. When they got to a place where they were able to do that and realized they couldn't track any energy or any mass, they've known for a long time that they've been lying to you and I when they tell you that all energy has to become mass and all mass has to become energy. Right? So that prism, I believe in the word. Every time, and I'll put it like this. Once again, this doesn't mean don't question the word. It does not mean don't question. We're doing Q&A today. It doesn't mean do not question the teacher, question the preacher, question what they're saying, right? But I'm telling you right now, the more the Bible, the more the prism I've looked at, it just helps me to not question even more. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do Q&A anymore, but it helps me to not question, at least for the sake of questioning. It helps me to get to a place where, okay, yeah, if this is there, you got to show me through this prism. You have to show me in your word how this makes sense. Because every time, so far, there are certain things that are not for me to know anyways until I leave this place. But for the most part, every time I ask, every time I pray about it, every time I look through that prism, even if it's stuff they told me when I was in school was this, come to find out, the way the Bible says is correct every time. So the earth is finally being admitted. It can't be like a ball. In any kind of theory, it has to be flattened. Persons are finally admitting this, but if you were with the Bible told you the whole time. The Bible told you there's gas, liquid, solid, without form and void, darkness upon the face of the deep, and then the deep, separates, and then solid from the top, and then solid from the bottom, right? Herb yielding seed, the seed needs waters were already on the bottom spraying up. Okay, well the seed needs light, and all of a sudden earth, moon, and the stars. I know that the 7 days or the 6 days really is when the earth was complete, but 6 days, right, and all these different things is all it took to be finished. And within the 6 days, you had literally stuff that they say the earth happens when the earth comes from the ground, right? You see volcanoes, that's how islands and all this stuff was formed. When they say there's Pangea, the Bible says the earth was together. It tells us where it split. So all these different things that are going on, we've had the biblical reference point. Having faith and working in what we have that faith in is what actually makes it a lot easier to be able to live in, a lot easier for me to even answer these questions. So I always look through the prism of the word. And that's what I think you should be honest. Even persons who don't agree with my beliefs or agree with our beliefs, they still, you got to show me the prism. And if you're faithful to it, I'm cool. It's when persons say, well, in order to make this prism work, I'm going to grab from this one and then put this here. No, you're being dishonest at that point. That's when you have to be careful This is what the word says in Romans chapter 10, verse 3. Right? Romans 10:1, Paul says that it's his prayer that Israel might be saved. Romans 10:2, Paul says that we have a zeal for Elohim, but it's not according to intimacy with his word or knowledge through his prism, right? So then he says that we got into everybody else's stuff. We would take something, and if we didn't like what y'all was saying here, we would actually say, well, we don't have to do that because we can do what they do over here, right? And persons are still doing that. That's when it becomes dangerous. See, that's when, like, somebody says, I'm Afrocentric, and they say, I'm just going to be Afrocentric. Everything that's African. Well, what's African? And then they start saying, well, African is what the Moroccans are doing. Are they the modern Moroccans? Are we talking about the actual Moroccans? Are we talking about the Carthaginians? Are we talking about the Carthaginians who actually followed the at least wrote the alphabet for a lot of stuff that they did? Who are we? You see what I'm saying? Who are we talking about? Right? Who are we talking about? Are we talking about when you say Canaan? What Canaan? What version? Right? Are we talking Mesopotamian? Are we talking Syrian? You know, these are different conversations we should have. You know, so there's a lot of different things where persons are speaking. I go through a prism thing because I've studied other prisms, right? I still do. I don't study them as hard as I did when maybe I was agnostic or maybe when I was still just coming to truth and when I was learning apologetics, you know, more so. But I study other prisms. And when if I see, for example, Dr. Sabi, he has a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't align. So the prism that I'm looking through from him is really more so just health. But if he starts talking about different things as far as stuff, he's very opinionated. He doesn't give a fact, right? He doesn't give anything that, right? And I'm not even saying a fact is always necessary, but he's not giving you things that truly happen. He's giving you things like, I think or I feel like this. So he goes that if there is a God, the woman would have to be God, right? Using, once again, Germanic language and different thought processes to come together on something that should be, you know, exclusive to the culture that he's going. If he's saying, I'm leaving that other stuff behind and I'm coming through a prism, right, then he has to figure out whose prism. Because if you just, this is one of the things that's really messing persons up. Everybody's trying to be so nice nowadays, right? Thank you, Sister Donna. We do have some books. I'm actually probably going to be working on one sooner than I thought. I'm gonna try to get to getting one a year in at least. And I have to do one. I have to do a manual every year, bare minimum, for 4 hours of power, which I think comes up in. I'm not sure if that's September this year or October, maybe even November. But we'll get to those things. But I'm sorry. You said you have a weird question. Does that mean that the word Afro derived from African? Somewhat, yes. So African is not really even. African is kind of sort of a African name. So there were a group that was known as Afli, or Afli, which is really a Greek terminology. But I believe they called themselves something very similar to Aflik or something like that. They could be heard as Aflik, right? So eventually you have like these persons get conquered or get defeated or get pushed away by the Greeks. And so, or maybe even the Romans. And the Greeks were fighting and stuff like that already in these territories, but the Romans kind of come in. And so you'll have persons that are like known as Africanus Scipianus or Scipianus Africanus. I might be going the wrong direction with that. But you see all these persons catch up, right? So Africa is a name, and this is pretty much how, even if you look at Alkebulan, Ethiopia, Kush, Kemet, Egypt, right? Even some were used the term Morocco, Africa. What persons call the whole continent is really what one group of persons were, right? African and African, especially the further back you go in time, a Cushitic person would comprehend that Kush. Maybe they would think to themselves at one point, Kush is the center of the world, but they would never go Kush. Being Cushitic or Ethiopian is what you should call the South African. But others who don't know anything about your land and come in and just want to say we're conquering everything, they'll say, well, if we are giving Kush problem, Kush was never conquered, by the way, technically. But Kush, we come in there and they say we never conquered, or I'm sorry, we conquered Cushitic person, or we conquered Kemetic. So since we conquered Kemet, all of Africa is now Kemet, right? We conquered these Afrique people, so all of the Africans are now under us, right? Now we know that we're still going to have Mali, we're still going to have Timbuktu, we're still going to have Nubians, we're still going to have there's a specific person so I'm keep jumping over. I mean Ashanti, Swi, etc. Well, we're still. I'm looking for West Africa now. The one of the homie, but not even just them. Who is it? Who made the wall? The Benin, right? We're gonna have the Kingdom of Benin. We're gonna have all these different things. Niger as well. Nigeria is actually a term to somebody who was dating a married man. So the side piece of a married man, when they sold the corporation rights and everything, and that person named what you call the country. Now they named the corporation Nigeria, right? So there's a lot of interesting things that go on with all that stuff, right? But yeah, the Afro is in a sense a African word, but it's taking some twists and turns, and it's more so been now westernized. Where if we hear Afro something, Afro Skipianis, Afro whatever, we're thinking that it's Afro. It's more so a conquering thing. So the Afro American is kind of sort of, but the Afro American can be anybody of any kind of African descent because that's part of a corporation. Remember, Afro American is a corporative term. It's in Black's Law Dictionary, and it tells you that anybody who's Afro American or African American is a fake person, is an artificial person, right? If you were a Black American, if you were an African American, right? If you were an Afro American, right? If you were POC, all these terms that they give you. If you're LGBTQ plus, when they start writing this stuff out, they're only giving any kind of rights through the corporation, and they're giving these artificial rights as an artificial country. They're giving these artificial rights to artificial persons. So that's why I tell persons you should always be careful with anything that anybody's calling you. Right? Anything anybody's always calling you is you have to think about what you're being called. If whatever you're being called on paper, if it's accepted, either it's accepted because they have to protect your nationality, which is you coming from a private point of view, or for the most part with us it should be, or you're dealing with somebody who is saying this is an artificial version that we can do some kind of business with. Right? How you doing, Black Rose? So back to the main question. And great questions, by the way, and I see some others popping up. But yeah, so we have a lot of different things that are going on in that. So one of the biggest things you can do is make sure you hold on to the word, right? Hold fast to the word, hold fast to Yahashua, hold fast to the principle, the origin, the original thing. For for we wrestle, there we go, Ephesians. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the origin. The problem with us that we're going through as a society and as a people is the original thing. Right? Somebody's trying to get you to fight against your origin. That includes the origin of the law. Right? You guys see I have this very well crafted and very nice outfit, right? By Bruta. And it's got tassels and everything on the bottom, right? And it's become tzait, right? And all the stuff that persons have made up over time. But the reality is that when it said make sure you have your fringes, the fringes didn't necessarily even have to look like this or even have to be. The fringes were more even scraggly, but this has become stylized. Now, is it bad to still have them as fringes? No. It looks great. But just hear what I'm saying, the fringes were even stuff that just happened over time. Right? The fringes, if you wear something out in the desert and wilderness long enough, it'll start to fray. Right? So on the fringe, you see some fringes hanging. Now, does that mean that we're not wrong? I do a different thing sometimes to braid up stuff and braid up different things and make fringes. We've done so in the past. Right? You said many misinterpret the definition of principalities and confuse it with principles. Or principles. Hold on one second. I'll be honest, you might be. Oh, okay. Okay, I see what you're saying. Right. Well, yeah. So a principality. I mean, there's a slight difference. So let me do it like this. I'll even look it up just to make sure I'm saying it right. Yeah, because what? So basically, you're talking about the spelling, right? So principal with the A-L at the end, and principal, which is P-L-E at the end, can be headed different places. But even still, that gets to denotation and connotation, right? Because connotation is how it feels, versus denotation is what it literally means. But yeah, so principal is generally used as a noun or adjective to refer to something or someone of primary importance, or a person in charge, like a school principal. Principle is a noun referring to a fundamental truth or belief, right? So the principal thing is what you're saying is we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principals. Here's what I do with the denotation and connotation, right, of the words, right? So what you're saying is basically, because really, if you're talking about the root of the word and everything, that's all the same. We're talking about the end, or not necessarily a suffix, but we're talking about the end of of what these words are. I guess we could say it's a suffix, right? It counts in a weird way. So principal, right, is talking about the power that one has, right? But also, what is the responsibility? See, this is denotation and connotation. What is the responsibility of a principal, right? To ensure rule, order, structure. So the principal has to live by a principle, which is why you guys will go back and forth. It's in essence a word that was actually a dialect thing when it became different things in different European nations. And so now we hold on to the principal and principle sounds that persons have. And in different cultures, they focus more on the origin of something. In different cultures, they focus more on the leadership, right? So, but yeah, so principal in denotation means a person who's up high. Principle, by the denotation, means it is, you know, has become in the language that we speak now. Principle means what? That one must make sure they're rooted and grounded in truth and in culture and facts, etc. Right? But you put the denotation now that we got that connotation is that every principal, somebody up high, should always be taking us to the principle, right? To the rule. To the point to where we would even say, once again, what is the word for canon or the word for rule mean? It is supposed to be a ruler. Rule is a way of measuring. You see? So yeah, so that's a great point. Like that principal, principle. And they're easy to get confused. And sometimes it's easy to confuse the fact that, hey, they actually go together so much that literally, when they were spoken at one point, it was all, now I don't know which one came first, if principal came first or principle. Probably it was principal, more than likely, but I can't tell you that part. I can tell you though, as far as the words, it's very clear when you study that. That's why I was saying, if you look at the prism, looking at the etymology, right, holding it accountable with what that culture does and knowing where that word comes from, right? Matter of fact, let me double check before I fall on my face. Let me do this real quick. Okay, so yeah, so it's a very Germanic word. Okay, very Germanic word. And if somebody says, well, no, it says it's French, if it's Franc, Germanic word, right? They say, no, it's Latin, it's Romantic. If you guys know about what happens with the Germans and stuff that take over, and the Francs who actually had kind of their own thing, they were allowed to do their own thing as long as they stayed Roman. This is why you think of the French language sounding romantic, right? As they had Roman antics even in the language that they spoke, and used a lot of the Latin in their stuff, as well as keeping some of the Gullic stuff that was there. So anyways, I'm going to a very nerdy place with that. But long story short, how you doing, Sister Diana? Diana, how you doing, Sister Monica? So, and all these things that are going on, we have to be very, 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 very careful with some of these word usages. Long story short, but yes. So when we're talking about that, every principal, a principal is a high place, right, or person in a position. So, but also principality, right, is going to also deal with one who's dealing with your origin, truth, etc. Because every principle, right, should be connected to a principal. Every principal should be connected to their principles. If that makes sense. I know I just went all around the world for that. Okay. But long story short, yeah, so I make it a point to look through a prism. If I'm looking through the correct prism, it becomes a lot easier for me to be able to decipher the word. So a lot of things that persons are bringing into the conversation, a lot of things persons bringing in, like colorism. Colorism is something that we got not from ourselves. In Israel, there was no such thing as colorism. If they right, like in Israel, most of us were going to be the same shade, but there were persons who would be lighter. There would be persons who might have different things. There would be persons who might, come in different shades, have different eye colors, have different hair, etc. Especially when other persons might be grafted in, which we forget happened quite often. Happened in the wilderness somewhat. Happened quite often, right? And when you read the word, and don't realize that every nation makes a way for persons to be grafted in, right? If right, every nation has a thought process that persons could be grafted in, right, from different cultures. Even persons who try to say that they are Aryan and all that stuff. If you look in there, you'll see persons who clearly are, might come from different places, but are mixed in or were even raised and stuff like that. That's a whole other thing. But I'm just saying, long story short, we should recognize that the prism. Let me get back to the prism. The prism is what's gonna carry us and keep us. So when somebody tries to get you into an argument, somebody's talking about the universe, Monique with her whole thing talking about God as the universe and whatever you want to call it. Well, she's correct, because God is a Germanic way of saying you can worship whatever you want to worship. So she said the universe, if you put kindness into it, all this stuff or whatever, this is the same Monique who, so now she's become bigger than the concept of a person to be worshipped. She believes the universe has intelligent design, right? She's putting that out. Now, a bunch of persons who just follow her and say, oh, she's a nice person, she's this, she comes off as nice, but if she's going against the will of our Father, she might do so with a smile on her face. She might do so and give you warm and fuzzies when she calls you baby, right? She might do so and do so in a manner in which she doesn't say any curse words. But is she correct? Is she righteous? Remember, we just went over this term on Monday, acheval. Whenever you see the word iniquity, it is acheval, or it is evil. You see that? The word evil means iniquity. So shaping in iniquity is shaping in evil. Iniquity also means that I'm going to do something against the law. That means that there's injustice. I don't want justice. I don't want law. So anybody who's telling you they don't want law, they don't want justice, that is acheval, that is evil. Right? By definition. You see? So when somebody says what is evil, a lot of people say, well, good versus evil. Good can be whatever you want it to be. You got to be careful. So we're not into good. Good can be whatever you want to be and whatever you want to worship. Evil, acheval, is anything opposed to the law. So if I follow the law, there are no laws against following the law. Right? There are no laws. There are no laws in love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, being like Elohim, being faithful, being humble, and having self-control, or making sure that the temperature is correct, that everything is there so that the temperature can move the way it's supposed to. And how you doing, babe? Thanks for being on. My wife is on the Audible Alma. As always, you can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, or website, and Pinterest. At Bloom and Flourish. Well, actually on YouTube, you can check her out at Bloom Flourish. I forget the numbers that are attached, but I'll put it up at the end. BLOOMFLOURISH. But thank you for being on, babe. Love you very much. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for hooking me up with the water to make sure I can get started. But you have to realize that a lot of persons are coming with a lot of different stuff. So yeah, I can see why that's very difficult. It's very difficult to keep up with so many different things. Persons might mean well, right? But just because somebody means well doesn't mean that, if somebody's blind and they want to lead you and you're blind, they mean well because maybe you need to get away from, I don't know, a lion got loose at the zoo. And here you are running around and you need to get away. And the blind person has enough sense to say, hey, we need to get out of here. But the blind leading the blind could mean you could lead them right into the lion. Or trying to run away from the lion, you could lead them into the ditch. Or trying to lead them into a ditch, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of stuff that persons mean well, right? Like we said, I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to be righteous, a right, lawful standard, right? I'm not trying to be right. I want to be tzedak. I want to be righteous, so that I don't fall for anything that is not within the law, which is acheval, or evil. Remember that by definition, anything that is against the law is in fact evil. Now, once again, though, you have to look at prisms. This is when somebody's morality is in question. Not that they have no morals or no scruples. Their morality is not yours. You said yes, and the more we learn, the more we realize how much more we need to learn. This is why you have leaders lead the flock. Well, leaders should train up leaders, and leaders should teach leaders, and that's why Levites should teach Levites, or a person should be grafted into Levitehood, right, to priesthood before we go through all these things. How you doing, Sister Lisa? So we have to recognize and realize very quickly a lot of persons are out of pocket. A lot of persons are out of pocket. A lot of persons don't know any better. They're not aware. They do not realize how the word works. Right? A lot of persons, it's very easy for them to bounce here and there. See, that's one of the things too. Once again, if you are a babe, and this might get some persons to not even be on listening to me if they feel like they have to go somebody else. But I'm telling you, if you are a babe, first of all, if you're born again, you can't be born again until you've gone through a gestational period. A lot of you don't realize you got to go into the womb of the mother. Who is the mother? Who is the one? Who is the wife of the Most High? You have to go into the womb of Yahushua. And we have to have some connection, some DNA for us has to rub off. You might be in the word of the Father, but your word, the seed, the Zara, is supposed to be planted inside of the womb. And it has to have a chance to grow. And what happens is a lot of us, we just want to get into whatever. We just want to do whatever. And so we just do whatever. Right? And we do whatever, and then we just hoping and praying that, stuff works, but your prayers aren't being answered the way you want, because you don't just do whatever you want and then pray that whatever happens. No, you make sure you follow the law. Remember Shalah or Shelo or Shiloh, but Shalah is literally just saying that it is a petition. Prayer is a petition. If you're gonna make Shalah, if you're gonna make a prayer to the Most High, right? Then you have to petition him. A petition is a request or demand made upon the government based off of your constitutional rights. How you doing, Lilac? Thanks for being on. Right? So if you're making requests or demands, but they're not based off of your constitutional or what we might call biblical right, then you're not righteous. Then you're not righteous. Right? So when somebody's coming to me and having a conversation, at some point I just have to be quiet and let them go. And I'll realize a lot of times when I try to say something back, a lot of times they're like, no, well this and this, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. So they're not really coming from the point of view of the Bible. So then I try to have a conversation with them where they're going. And sometimes they'll even get upset with you. Persons will get frustrated. I've had this happen on the phone a couple of days ago. Somebody will get frustrated with you. And by the way, the person, it's whatever. I'm cool. You didn't do anything disrespectful. I'm just saying I could hear. Remember, I was saying I could hear voice and stuff going up, because we get frustrated, we get mad, we get angry. But a lot of persons have never told you, like, hey, you're still in the process of being born again, and you need somebody to actually teach you and tell you, like, hey, that's not how we conduct stuff in this body, right? You were in another body. It might even seem similar. You were on another tree, but you grafted in, and it's going to take time. It'll even be painful sometimes, but it takes time to come together. But if you want your fruit to ever go correctly, you have to do what's necessary. You don't just get grafted in because somebody takes you and just throws you on a tree and then leaves you, right? It takes time and it takes effort. It takes some stuff just to get you on there, right? If somebody really, really cares for you, it takes some, in the manner that they're cutting you even. Right? They're cutting you off from where you were. That hurts. Plant life has feelings. Even in that hurts. But if somebody's going to be grafted in, you got to take the time out to let it hurt and to let somebody teach you righteousness and teach you what's achival atasataik, right? A lot of you were shaping in iniquity. Remember, when Adam and Eve, when they ate of the fruit, once they ate of it, they decided that they wanted to do what they wanted, the ability to be against the law. They thought that they would know more than Yah, and they wouldn't know anything else. But they wanted to be gods, so to speak, in their own eyes, right? But when they ate of the fruit, it meant that you're cut off, right? Because the fruit gave you the right? That tree, even what you are, what you eat. Just like your parents, you are what you eat. That's why you eat curses and stuff. You have to realize how to get that out of you and expel that before you get to the next generation. But you are what you eat. So when they ate of the tree, they could have ate of a tree that had a lineage of righteousness, and that was it. But they decided to eat of a tree that actually had a lineage of righteousness and evil. They didn't want to just be right. They wanted to know all things. So if you want to know all things, you have to be able to know all things. Now you're not prepared, since you're not the Most High. You're not prepared for those things that go against Him within yourself. So when you touch something that it goes against Him, you have the right to touch it. But once you do, you start to fall apart. So your lineage that you ate of, the fruit that now is in your body that affects your fruit, is a chaval. It's evil. It is iniquity. Right? Yeah, so their eyes were open, but their eyes were open now to, oh, I'm going to go against Yah, because that's what you ate of. In order to go against Yah, right, you had to, if you want to go against Yah, it's your choice. Now that you eat, and by the way, this is one of the questions, kind of, sort of, we're not going to get all the way into it right now, but it's kind of sort of dealing with another question that's on the list. If I'm going to eat the fruit, right, that allows me to be of a lineage that's created, the fruit, the seed, all that is created to be able to make sure that you can eat of something that's against Yah. Once I eat this, now I have the ability to do so many different things that are against the Most High, because I ate of the fruit, I ate of a lineage. Right? Why don't you eat? Why is it that you have to be careful what you eat? If you go outside and you're not growing your own food, let's say you grow your own food and you go somewhere else down the street and you start to see food that's growing as well, and you know that the food that's down there has some oil and stuff around it, you probably don't want to eat those things, because the oil is probably seeped into the ground, and so even the plant life that exists around there, if it still does exist, has ate of that oil. So you don't want to eat of those plants. Why? Because there's a lineage that comes through those plants. There's a lineage now that grows, that's given to the next generation oil in their system. Even if you don't eat of the oil directly, to eat of the plant that has somehow soaked the oil up, it becomes dangerous for you, right? But if you eat of the tree that you know is pure, and you know the lineage of it, and you know the lineage has not been tainted, then you know that you won't have the same thing. So even if it's the same vegetation, if you will, in two different spots, you're looking for the one that does not have a lineage of unrighteousness. Right? That's right. Indeed, that means you got to talk about the soil and all that. So the soil, the roots, all those things. So that being said, we're talking about somebody who's coming in and being grafted in, right? Graft in is a process, and you have to look at who you're being grafted into. We also too, it would be bad of us, right? It might not work out necessarily the wrong way, but it would be wrong of us to take a tree, right, that is sick, and try to graft that into a tree that's well, because even though you'd be like, well, I'm saving the sick tree, you might mess up the tree that's well. It depends, right? So I'm saying all that to say, we have to be careful what we allow and how we allow anything in to this nation, to this our nationality, right? Right? We have to be careful about these different things that are going on. If not, then this is part of the problem that's happening. We're having so much stuff be brought in because everybody just says, I like what you're doing. I like what you're doing. I want to be part of it. I want to do what you're doing. But a lot of persons don't take time out to say, wait a minute, we got to actually, see what's being brought in and make sure that it remains pure. Not pure as far as just because it's black, whatever. Even though I don't have no problem with us realizing it's okay to say that we look a certain way, and nobody should. That being said, though, we're also talking about when you come in here, you got to come in with a pure word, with a pure heart, with a pure mind. If you're not, then we got to deal with it as such. Another question somebody had: will the bride be raptured before tribulation or when the Father comes? There is no evidence of a gathering, and I know that the Messiah comes to reign on earth, the Father for judgment, heaven on earth. So I was talking, we didn't talk about this live. We were talking about this in North Carolina video. Okay. So a lot of stuff, first of all, has to be dealt with in that. If you're talking about the rapture, right, the rapture, rapturo, is not even talking about what's going to physically happen. It's talking about the speed, because raptor or rapture is talking about a bird. So the speed of a bird is going to come down and scoop up everybody, basically. And some birds, some raptors can literally come down at about 230, 240 something miles per hour. So the quickness of what's going to happen is going to be astounding, and nobody will be able, just like that attack of the raptor, it can literally hit the spine of an animal, and that's it, it's over. The animal has no time to react. Just all you see is the animal's body almost explode and then fall to the ground. Right? It's a very crazy thing to witness. But yeah, so the rapture and the raptor is talking about the speed of it. Now we do have Revelation chapter 20. Let's go there together. We're going to go to Revelation chapter 20. Great question so far. Hopefully I'm doing well in answering them. Let's go to Revelation chapter 20. All right. Okay. I'm going to just start at the top. Revelation chapter 20. Once you have it, say amen. Say, God, I'm with you, so I'm listening. We'll read it together. Revelation chapter 20. All right. And it reads as follows. And I saw an angel, a messenger, come down from Shemayim, from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Now recall, we've been talking about this. The bottomless pit, which is Shalom, which is Sheol, which is hell, is not open yet. So we're getting some key words here. So if he's got the key, right, to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand, that means that he's getting ready to deal. We're talking about the one who has to be given permission by the Most High. So he cannot open hell until he's been given permission. Okay? Now watch this. Verse 2. This is when I say, this is what tells us when stuff really is going to start popping. All right? When we can start saying, okay, hell is open. Who is it open to first? All right. Revelation chapter 20 and verse 2. And he and the angel and this messenger laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, Satan, right? The Satan. All right. So and he laid hold on the dragon, this serpent, this dragon from from Genesis chapter 3 all through Revelation, mentioned as the serpent, the dragon, etc. over and over again. All right. Here we go. So and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. So he bound him 1,000 years. And by the way, this 1,000 years is interesting. I can't tell you. I'm not going to tell you. I know there's somebody else who would try to say that they could. I don't believe there's evidence to the contrary. That being said, I will tell you that there's somebody who else says they could tell you. Right? I haven't seen the evidence. That being said, though, we don't really know if this 1,000 years is a physical 1,000 years, because all the years that you're seeing in your Bible, including in Revelation, having to do with dreams and visions or revelatory dreams and visions, which you're seeing in Daniel and you're seeing in Genesis and you're seeing in Jeremiah and you're seeing in Ezekiel and all these different places, you're seeing with Elijah, different references and stuff, you're seeing with the transfiguration. Okay, well, here's all these different things. When it starts talking about time and dreams and visions, they are not physical time, right? So a time times and half a time, when Yahashua was on earth physically, that means 3.5 years. That's how we know how long he was here. But time times and half a time, as far as a dream or vision, usually it's going to be talking about, talking about 1,260 days, right? It's a whole different thing, because a day in a dream can be a year. It usually is, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on, right? But but the Satan is bound 1,000 years. Whether this is 1,000 years actually to the number, or more than likely 1,000 years, which could be longer or shorter, representing a specific thing, right? 1,000 years is a millennia. 1,000 years could just be saying for a really long time, giving reference. We don't really know 100% how long this is going to be, right? But he's bound. Verse 3, and cast into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and sat a seal upon him, that he should not deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that must be loosed a little season. So after that he must be loosed again, but just for a small amount this time. So basically it's saying here right? A lot of persons don't catch this. There's going to be 1,000 years where humanity will be without the devil, right? The devil will be captured and he'll be put in hell, and those who are still on the earth will be on the earth without the influence of the devil. Now, this is when it gets really interesting because there's different beliefs and there's different, fights on this, right? So this is where it gets interesting. And let's talk about SOC's belief on it. Why not? This is where it gets interesting because a lot of persons will say different things, but this is telling us that the devil is going to be thrown into hell and he'll be sealed to where even from hell he has no influence. That means that there are persons who still worship the devil even though they don't have to. A lot of persons will go, oh, this is a time, and I used to somewhat believe this. I don't know if I ever really taught this, but I used to somewhat believe this, that everybody who was left on the planet Earth was going to be, everything was going to be cool and we were going to sing Kumbaya. But no, the devil will be put in prison for 1,000 years. Some believe this 1,000 years has already started. I'm not 100% sure when. And once again, no man knows the day or the hour. This is stuff that's working together with y'all, working all things together for Tabat, including part of what he's working with is supposed to be us proclaiming this correct word together so that the correct word of Yah has gone throughout the nations. Right? Grand Rising Utensil. So there's a lot of stuff that's moving here where what if, when is this, blah, blah. We don't 100% officially know. There are persons that will tell you, well, we know because of this. I would be honest with you, if there is a time that we should realize that the Satan has no influence, but his word and everything and people who work for him are still doing things in a certain spirit, right? To be against Yah. If anything, it happened in the early 1800s, if it has happened, right? I'm gonna even give you some maybes. If anything, maybe in the early 1800s, because that's when the Roman Catholic Church ends up having the Pope be killed. He was killed in 1796, right? And then after that, the head or the Roman Catholic Church that was the leadership, it looked like it had been killed, but it came back. So if you want to start possibly the 1,000 years there, maybe. But we don't really have anything specific that tells us this is exactly when, because a lot of this stuff is also interdependent upon Israel, the wife of Yah, and when we start doing what we're supposed to do, right? When we start doing what we're supposed to do, the clock starts to tick. So if you want Matthew chapter 24, verses 13 and 14 to happen, then you must do your part. If you want Yehoshua to come back, you have to start the clock. And even if there is 1,000 years, and let's say from 1896 till now, it's already been going, or 1796 till now, we've already been dealing with this stuff. So that means that you still got 800 years. That means that if that is the case, if that even were, once again, no man knows the date of the hour. Don't take this as 100% fact. I'm just giving you a theory. That being said, even if your theory is correct, that means that you still are supposed to be righteous. Start separating. Be sure there's a place for others to separate, because things are going to get worse and worse and worse. So no matter when the 1,000 years has actually started or not, could have started earlier, could have started sooner, but we see here that the devil gets to a place to where, I'm sorry, could have started earlier, could have started later, excuse me. But once we get to this place, it says that we're now ticking down to where the devil is not an influence. Right? It says now we're ticking, that's when we've been in the last days since Yehoshua. Persons forget the last days doesn't mean that he was saying, oh yeah, last days has to be 5 minutes, last days has to be 5 years. No, you're in the last days, the last period of time, as far as time and as far as evil is on the earth, as far as achiva, as far as iniquity is on the earth. You're in those last days, right? You're in the last days of iniquity. You're in the last days of sin, right? You're in the last periods of time when this stuff will take over. So whenever the devil is cast into prison, I would say that I believe he's already been cast in, and that a lot of stuff that we actually give way to the devil is stuff that he's already put on here. He has no influence, but his demons are still out here, and his spirits are still being worshipped, and persons are still out here putting governments together to make sure that you and I are influenced, and there's still a lot of antichrist spirits. Right? That being said, I'm giving you some maybes, I'm giving you some stuff. You look it up, you pray about it. If you're unsure, like I'm still unsure, it's okay. But I'm just telling you, if these things are true, that's where they are. How you doing, Elder Tamara? Right? So we don't know exactly how long this reign will be, but there's going to be a reign or a time in which the devil has no influence, but persons still do wickedness. Yah will still, at this point, because watch this, Yah is going to give humanity such a chance that he's going to say at some point, what if the devil had? Just like with Job. Job had no influence of the devil because the devil said he had a hedge of protection. And Job had a choice, and in his choice, he chose righteousness. Right? The devil was released on him. In when that happened, Job still chose righteousness. Okay, well, the Most High says there's going to be a time that I'm coming to get the devil, and I'm going to chain him up. I'm going to throw him in hell. He'll be in hell. And while he is in hell, unlike these books tell you, he will have no influence on you directly. He's already sown his influence into the earth. Let's see what you do. I've sown mine into the earth. He's sown his. Right? I sowed wheat. He came behind and put tear. I went ahead and I threw him into the pit. And now you've got all this time before I send my angels back, my messengers back, and they're going to begin to separate the wheat from the tear. Right? Does that make sense? So he's giving us that. All right, so watch this. Verse 3, Revelation chapter 20, verse 3, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. Verse 4, and I saw, we're going towards At, and I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment, all right, was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua. Now hold on. And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. Wait a minute. And I saw what? Thrones. And I saw what? Thrones. I saw kingdoms. Right? So there are kingdoms that are not directly influenced by the Satan, right? But still are influenced by his word and by others. Okay? Watch the judgment. Right? There's those who, even if you're not directly getting everything from the Most High, you still should be influenced of his word. The seed has been planted. Right? What prism, as we were talking about earlier today, what prism will you allow to shape your life? Right? Verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua. These are not the same ones who are on the throne. He's talking about earthly thrones. I saw persons sitting on earthly thrones, right? And I saw them sitting on earthly thrones, and they must be judged no matter how much money they make, no matter what their kingdom is called, no matter who they're over, no matter how many persons come to their religious services, all this stuff. I saw them, all of them, they got to be judged. But then I saw another place where there were those that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua. When I saw those that were willing to lose their head, when I saw those that said that they would rather be, that Christ, they would rather have Christ as their head than keep their own. You catch that? That's a bar. Holy Spirit teaching today, right? I saw persons who believed that Yah should be their head, their Rosh, so much that they said, take my head, because as long as my body's in existence, Yahushua can be my head. Right? This is what's talking about. Beheaded for the witness of Yahushua. Remember, a witness is not just saying, I'm going to say what I saw. A witness is considered to be lawfully somebody who has seen what's going on. So they've seen Christ. Have you seen Christ in your life? Yeah, one day to Yah can equal 1,000 to man, but that's not always even what they're talking about too. But even take that into account, right? So we're not sure. But it's saying here, in these last days, which would basically just mean the times that are last, or what should we do in these times to last. But in these last days, in these times that are going to be the last of wickedness, no matter how long that is, it tells us that the Satan will be locked up, right, and cast into the bottomless pit, and he will not be able to deceive the nations anymore for the 1,000 years. But still after that, persons will be judged, because some of you don't even have the devil to worry about, right? If you're one of these persons that believe that the devil has already been thrown into the bottomless pit and 1,000 years has already started, what you're actually in right now is a place where the devil has no direct influence. The only thing that happens is persons are up here digging up the past and saying, ooh, what about this? And, well, the Aztecs did this, and the Maroons, that we act like everything they did was lawful. It was great that they fought. But everything they did was lawful. And, oh, wait a minute, there's this Afrocentric person. Everything that they do is lawful. Oh, wait, there's Eurocentric persons. Everything that they do is lawful. Or, hey, everything that they do has to be wrong. So you can't even study or learn anything from them without it being through a context to where you might actually miss the truth. Because even if somebody's lying to you, every lie is based off of truth. That's why I said let the prism matter more so than the other stuff, right? I want the prism to be proper. When I have a proper prism, I'm gonna get the truth. How you doing, Herbetter? Found us again. Praise y'all. Thank you for finding us. Right? So right, but it says he saw the ones who were the witness of Yehoshua who had been beheaded. And I want you to catch all of this stuff that's about to go on with this, right? We're in Revelation chapter 20 right now, on verse 4. So it says, and I saw the thrones, and they sat they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls, the nachivash, the psychology, the psyche of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yehoshua and for the word of Elohim, and which had not worshipped the beast. This is the key part right here too, right? Key part. I know you asked about something specific, but I'm just laying some stuff down for us. The key part. This is those who had not worshipped the beast. Who is the beast? What is the beast? We've said this plenty of times, but just to make sure everybody's on the same point. What is the beast, beloved? Because these persons that are judged right to be righteous, of right lawful standing, they cannot be of right lawful standing and judge the beast. They cannot be martyrs and they cannot be persons and worship the beast. They cannot be martyrs and worship the beast. These martyrs, right, are persons that were willing to lose their life and would not worship the beast. Christ is their head. All right, the devil, the serpent, the red dragon. Yep, so he's over the beast. So when we say the beast, there's several beasts. So you're right, Donna, as far as if you're talking about him being the serpent. But the beast represented in Revelation 13, and the second beast represented in Revelation 13. Who is this beast? What is this beast? The beast, which is the Satan is over and is made to mirror the Satan. When the Satan is locked up, there's a beast. It's a government. 7 heads, 10 thorns, right? When you put that together with Daniel chapter 4 and the 10 thorns, you'll realize that these are 7 heads that go like this, right? We're dealing with, really, there's a couple ways we can go with it, but we'll do it this way, right? You're dealing with Kemet, right? Assyria, Babylon, Medes and the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, and then anybody who mixes iron with clay, which oftentimes is going to be in Christianity, but also too in the mixing of iron and clay, you get Judaism. In the mixing of iron and clay, you get what many of our Muslim brothers don't understand they're actually doing as well, right? You get Ishtar, you get moon worship, you get moon and sun, right? Worship. You get the S-O-N becomes the S-U-N. This is what we're supposed to be leery of and be afraid of and make sure that we teach against, right? Know that anybody who's doing this is our enemy because they are achiva, they are evil, because that is a sinful place and it is unrighteous. All right. So, and for the word of Elohim, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, image, the imagery, the flag, looking at all these movies that tell you that the beast is all right? All these things that make you want to be the beast, make you want to dress up like him. Netflix shows like Lucifer, things like Constantine, especially if you got into the actual comic books or the graphic novels of Constantine, right? Things that have you wanting to be the Flash, which you don't know is Nike, or you don't know is the Nike or Hermes, which a lot of you laughed at in Futurama, if you remember, but he's just representing a guy. They put a Jamaican accent on it so that you wouldn't really, you would think that they were, first of all, they wanted to have representation, but then they didn't want you to think too much into it, but that's what Hermes is. That's why he's got like godlike abilities, if you will, right? He's got these deity abilities, uncanny abilities when it comes to shipping things and the perfection in it. And if he misses one stamp, how they look mad upon that, right? And this Hermes, this deliverer, by the way, is big time into the government. If he doesn't do what the government says, or you don't do what the government says, he has an issue with you, right? You don't realize that Superman is supposed to be, or not supposed to be. Superman is not allegedly. This is a fact. Superman is made by two white Jews who use Kal-El, which is a Hebrew word, to reference the point to say that he is of El. His father, who you never are able to see in person, but speaks to him, right, is somebody that helps him to realize his true value and who he is, right? And you don't know that these are two white Jews that said that, hey, we don't fit in society and people don't like us, and so we disguise who we are, right, by fitting into the so-called weak person. Superman is the opposite of all the other persons, right? Bruce Wayne is Bruce Wayne, but he becomes Batman, right? The Flash is, forgive me, I forget his name, but he's a regular person, he becomes the Flash. The Hulk is Bruce Banner, but then when he gets upset, he comes outside of himself. Superman is the only hero, so-called hero, that actually becomes, that is who he is, but to fit into your society that you would not know who he is and the strength he actually has, he becomes something weaker. And these were written by two Jewish persons to let you know that we actually are more in control than what y'all think. But at the time, especially, you know, they could get beat up just for being Jews. I guess still you could say that could happen to them. So what did they do? They make Superman. Superman, though, is basically Apollos, right? Or if you know about the mythology with Odin and all them, he is Baldur. But Superman is a deity. He's a spirit. All of them are, right? That's why he gets his power from the sun and all that too, right? But he's Baldur, right? He gets his power from the sun. Apollos gets his power from the sun. Is the sun, right? So this is something that's there. You're reading these comics. You don't know that Batman is a Central American spirit that used to be worshipped, right? Like all this different stuff. So this stuff is there, but Superman hides who he is that he might fit in, right? That's his goal, and he sees you as weak. So how does Superman see himself? How does Clark Kent see himself? What does he put on? What's the costume he puts on to make sure that y'all don't even think about the fact of how strong he is or the fact he looks like Superman? He says, "I'll put on a suit and a tie. I'll make sure that I'm under a woman, and that the woman kind of bosses me around, right? Even though he liked her too, you know. But he says I'll get a job as somebody who actually is supposed to give you the truth and controls the news, but you guys don't realize we control, blah blah." He's right. They say we'll give him glasses, right? And basically, you know, and that'll be all. And so once we basically give him once he takes off, because remember the Superman thing, a lot of y'all don't realize that's supposed to be the outfit, and it's supposed to be a character from his planet. So when you guys see the character, you guys start thinking Superman, but he actually is like, no, this character actually means hope, right? Just like you have an alphabet and persons are using it, and you don't even they just say this is the letter A, not even realizing you're talking about our Father who art in heaven, right? There's a lot of similarities, but that's who put the character together, right? And so I'm saying all that to just help you out. You might not recognize those things. You might not be looking for them. We might not be studying in that vein. But it helps us to get to a place where we recognize what's going on. So anyway, back to Revelation, right? So they hadn't worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had they received his mark upon their foreheads. Very important, because the tav is supposed to be upon our forehead, right? So you shouldn't receive his mark. The word mark means tav. So even when you see people with an upside down tav or an upside down cross and stuff, that's actually referring to, even whether they know it or not, they're marking their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. So there were persons who, after the devil, right, had influence taken away. There were those of us who reigned with Christ, right? There are those who reigned with Christ for 1,000 years, whatever this 1,000 years is. So they'll be able to be around Christ and reign. There will also be persons who are judged who can't reign, but there will be persons who were the martyrs, the ones who were beheaded, but by being beheaded basically have now gotten their spot. right? By proving that they were willing to give up their life and live their life for Christ before anybody else. They now have received their spot. Okay, verse 5. But the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. How we talk about the second death. So the rest of everybody else who's still alive during this 1,000 years, who's not righteous, they're judged too, right? The devil's gone, his influence is gone, everybody's judged. Those who go into righteousness or whatever, they get to go with Christ, right? And they reign with him, meaning we must be clean, lawful to do so. Everybody else who's unclean, unlawful, they lose their life during this period of time. That's what it tells us, right? But the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. So after this, now there's going to be something called a second death. Now the Satan, right? Oh, I'm sorry, verse 6. Barak and holy, Barak at Hakodash, blessed and holy is he that hath first part in the first resurrection. Right? Is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. So this is saying here, all right, those who basically were with Christ, right? And those who are dead will be there'll be a resurrection, a first resurrection, right? On the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of Elohim Mashachi, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. All right, now watch this, verse 7. And when the 1,000 years are expired, once they finish, what happens? Once they are expired, once they are what? Once they are expired, they're finished. Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. He shall be loosed out of hell, and shall go out to deceive the nations. Remember, he had influenced them already, but his influence, if you rock with influence, you died, right? And if you got his mark on your forehead, right, you tithed. If you marked out for him, so to speak, you died. Everybody else who did not, they live, right? Everybody who did not, they live. Okay. So, and shall go and deceive the nations. Now he's out to deceive the nations. He wasn't around to deceive. Now he's out and he's there to deceive the nations. Now remember, everybody else has died who was around that decided to follow the Satan's example and all that, right? Everybody who decided to die or was willing to die for Christ has actually been reigning with him now for 1,000 years. Now there is a first resurrection. And we're thankful and grateful to Yah for those who were obedient, right? Because if they were, they have become the priests. Now the 1,000 years are expired, the Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed and camped of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from Elohim at Shamayim, and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever. All right. So those who believe that you will be tormented day and night in hell, right? Hell is a place where you'll be tormented, but the lake of fire is what you should be more concerned about. The devil is loose after 1,000 years. And after 1,000 years, after everybody's been resurrected. Now, there's a couple ways this could even be taken too, if I want to be honest, because I don't 100% have all the answers here. But to be honest with you, right? But to be honest with you, we don't 100% know if this is, once again, because we don't even know when the 1,000 years actually starts. Has it started? Will it start? Is it actually 1,000 years? We just know it's the last days, and there'll be a period of time. So we obviously, if we haven't gotten to a point to where Christ, is reigning, right, with persons, we're obviously not in the 1,000 years yet, or at least not going through where persons are starting to get purged during this time, right? But either way, after this, so this could be something that means Christ is reigning with some of us, and persons don't catch it for 1,000 years, or right, or it could be something where it's saying basically the world is moving as if they are dead. Those who are with Christ are already reigning with him for 1,000 years. There's different ways we could look at that, right? But just nobody really 100% knows. Anybody who tells you they does, the Bible says no man knows the day nor the hour. So we have to be careful with that. That reminds us that we have to make note of the fact that we should always be in our P's and Q's, because who knows what time we're in eternity. We don't, right? So we get to this point where the devil that deceived them, he's cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, and the beast, his government, right? So the government stuck around after him, right? The beast and his government, but then also it says, it says the false prophet, which is that second beast, the antichrist, or at least the antichrist spirit, that second beast that told everybody to glorify the government. So the false prophet, one of the ways you can tell the false prophet is that the false prophet does not want you to be a nation. The false prophet wants you to bow down to the modern government. That's one of the ways you can tell an antichrist spirit or a false prophet. Is false prophets will not obey the laws of our nation. That's one of the ways you can tell somebody who's not Shemitic, whether grafted or otherwise, because they're telling you things that are not lawful. In our nation, you must obey the laws of the Most High Yah, period. Just like they would tell you, they would preach from the pulpit and tell you to make sure that your child goes out and obeys the law so that the police do not get them. But they would tell you and I to not obey Yah's laws and end up in hell. Now somebody says, where you get that from? If I don't obey the law, I end up in hell. Well, let's keep on reading. Revelation chapter 20, verse 11. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. So the former things have passed away, right? Sounds like Isaiah chapter 65. Revelation chapter 20, verse 12. And here's the part that nobody teaches us or tells us, right? And seems like it's out of nowhere, but it's right there in our Bible. It's right here in our Bible, right? Watch this, right here in your Bible. Nobody will denounce. If somebody denounces this, once again, we got to look at the, especially if you're a prophet or preacher, teacher. If you're going to denounce this or tell me that I'm wrong, you have to then tell me, why don't you believe in the Bible? This is right out the Bible. This is so-called New Testament. This is Revelation. All those hot spots for those who mix iron and clay, for the Christian, right? For those that say that they believe in the Bible. Okay, well, do you believe in this? This is the Messiah's. This is Messiah giving the revelation of Elohim to John to tell those who will be obedient and follow the law, to observe and do it. That's Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, and Revelation chapter 1, verse 3. You got to show this to me if you're saying, and tell me why you don't believe in Yah's word. Here we go. Revelation chapter 20, in verse 12. It says, and I saw, this is who? Yehochanan. This is John, right? Yakunan. John says, and I saw the dead, small and great. And I saw what? The dead, small and great, stand before Elohim. I saw who? The dead. All right, so those are remember, the dead, resurrected now, first resurrection, right? Those who were with Christ, reigning with him, who ended up doing what they were supposed to and were separated from those who would die off, they are already got their place. They're set. They don't have to worry about the second death. They're not even being brought before to deal with this resurrection, right? They were resurrected the first time and got it right the first time. Now there's a second resurrection, right, leading for persons who's going to lead to the second death. So who are these persons who are now being judged, and how are they being judged? What are we looking at in their life to see if they should be judged? What does it say in your Bible? Revelation chapter 20, verse 12. And I saw the dead, small and great. Doesn't matter how much money you make. Doesn't matter if you're a pastor. Doesn't matter if you're in the pews, right? It's small and great. Stand before Elohim, right? And what happened? And the books were opened. The scrolls were opened. What? The books were opened. The scrolls were opened. Okay, so there's scrolls open. Why is this important? Because there's another scroll that was opened. So there's several scrolls that are open, and then there's a scroll that's open. Now watch this. It says, which is the scroll or the book of life, which is of life. So there were several scrolls open, and then there's another scroll open, right? The scroll of life. And it says, and the dead were judged. So those who were dead, those who were going through this second resurrection, so that they can go through a second, hopefully figure out if they're going to go through a second death, and that this is how we're going to tell what happens with them. And the dead were judged out of those things that were written in the books, according to their works. So I've kind of been saying this in a way to get you guys to see what's going on, but I'm gonna be more specific because Holy Spirit brought it to my attention. I'm kind of been saying this a little wrong, and somebody could probably be taking what I'm saying the wrong way. So let me say this exactly the way that I should have been saying this whole time. And I apologize if anybody got anything out of it. Holy Spirit said address this. Make sure you say it correctly this time. Right? Exactly the way she told me. So watch this. Revelation chapter 20, verse 12. Once again, the word says, and the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. So in other words, John is sitting there, not John the Baptist, but John the youngest of the 12 apostles, of the 12 original apostles, of the 12 apostles at any time. He's the youngest of those, whether you talk about with Judas Iscariot or with their replacement for a hot second, or with Paul, right? He's the youngest. And so watch this. Peep game. You ready for this? Peep game. It says these it says here that the books are open, the scrolls are open, and they're judged according to their works. Right? Now faith without works has no life, which also means that works without faith has no life. But persons get this twisted, that because faith is extremely important and one can be grafted in, we're now taking on this thought process of trying to say, hey, become grafted in, and therefore the law no matter matters. But Paul never says that, as we've taught plenty of times in the Roman road. We've shown you in Romans chapter 7 where Paul says the commandments are holy, the law is holy, the law is spiritual, the law is without sin. If it wasn't for the law, he wouldn't know not to lust, because the lust is the covet, which is the 10th commandment. Just in Romans chapter 7, I mean, you can go to Romans chapter 3, it starts off by saying we have an advantage because we are Israel. Romans chapter 11, when it talks about being grafted in, starts off by saying that just because we're saying a person can come in doesn't mean you get rid of Israel. All over the place, all over the word. Thank y'all for the love. Right? But I want you to see this, right? Those who are resurrected the second time, those who now have an opportunity a second time, right? They actually are brought up after the Satan was let loose for a little bit of time, right? You weren't influenced by him for thousands of years. In fact, you were dead. Whether we want to talk about this being a physical death or just being dead, as far as we're not in the life of Yehoshua, we're not with him. But at this point, the Satan was not a direct influence for anybody for 1,000 years. And he's finally released now to be an influence. And see again, if persons will see the truth, see that they were separated, see that they didn't have the ability to reign with Yehoshua for 1,000 years. They've suffered, right? They were dead. The last thing they saw was basically them not being with Yah and us being with him. And now they have a chance after the Satan is let out. Now, once he's let out for a little bit of time, then he's thrown into the lake of fire. So is his government judged to suffer with him. So are his false prophets, or the false prophet, or the Antichrist, or this second beast, all thrown into the lake of fire. Now, the only thing left are those who had to go through a resurrection, right? So that they could experience possibly a second death. Right? So now they're going through a second resurrection. Okay? And they're being judged according to what's written in the scrolls, in the books of the Bible. Right? So according to their works. If you believe the word, we should see your works. Back that up. You catch that? If you believe in the word of Yahweh, if his word is true, then his word should be backed up by your works. You should do what he says. That's why your Bible keeps saying to observe towards doing, to observe and do, to be in what Yah has for you, right? You should believe what's in there, right? If it's in the Bible, you should believe that it's in there, and we should be able to tell that you have faith in it because of your works. I'm going to say something. I've said this before. Faith without works, a lot of persons have faith and they don't move in it. But for real, do you have faith in something if you'll never work it? And persons don't like when you talk like this, but this is real talk. Do you truly have faith? How you doing, Sister Osla? Do you truly have faith that if you become sovereign, you'll be in the private, but you never work it? Do you really have faith in it? Or do you have belief? You can believe it to be true, but not have faith. By the way, in order to have faith, you have to hope in it. My hope is built on nothing less than Yahshua's blood and righteousness. On Ad Mashachi, the solid rock I stand, although the ground is sinking sand. If I have faith in it, you'll see some works. Oh, that's what you sent me in the inbox? Okay, I apologize. We have a second day, so I'll try to see if I can recall to look in the inbox and see what we can catch. And you can still type stuff in different places that we put the Q&A, Q&A post up for all over the place. But you hear what I'm saying? So the false prophet, right? Many of the false prophets are trying to take you outside of a government. That's how we can tell most of these false prophets. They're busy telling you and I that what the Bible says as far as how we should be governed, the law, doesn't matter. Yeah, I see it. I got it. I got your question typed up. Right. So we got a lot of questions today. I'm kind of seeping through all of them. But yeah, so it's important, right? So move on to the next question real quick. So is Israel, now I'm not sure exactly, this was put in there, is not Israel the real state? So I'm not 100% sure what's meant by that, but I'm assuming the question basically goes as far as, no one knows the hour, that's right. The United Snakes of America. And sorry for missing those. How you doing, Cannon Clips? Thanks for being on. And somebody else came on. Thanks for being part of the community. Whoever just joined us, I apologize for missing you. But yeah. So, is Israel a real state? Israel is us. Remember, Israel is not where you are. Just like a nation is not where you are. You were tricked by this thing called a birth certificate recently in time. That until the 1940s in the United States of America, you wouldn't even thought was official, and it would have never been used maybe to identify if one was born, but it was never even intended to identify originally in its creation, whether or not you were part of a country, right? But it's proof and evidence that you were born, even though now it has been lumped into something else for the lowercase c citizen of the United States Corporation. But as far as Israel, remember, we're talking about nationality. Israel is a state. It is a country. The state of Israel is artificial, but we are, and it even depends on how you want to identify state. If you're talking about state as far as them and stuff, yes, but state of mind, state of being. The context and the culture that we come from is different. That being said, is Israel a state? The Israel that exists now was something that was bought and purchased. Remember, it was Palestine, and even the Palestinians are not those who you think they are either. But the Palestinians that were living there, and those who are actually still Israelites, believe it or not, like I'm talking about locks, dark skin, our clothing, what you call so-called African clothing, etc. You see them there in videos from the late 1800s and the early 1900s. You'll see them walking around throughout Israel, right? Which means that up until something happened, what happened in the early 1900s, because it wasn't until 1947 that all of a sudden Israel tried to say they were a real state, and they asked for persons to look at them as sovereign. And even when they asked, like, the Egyptian prime minister, he said, I can't say that you're Israel because when you left you were black, when you came back you were white. So, when we have that stuff there, and we have evidence of that, then we have to say, okay, well, what happened to Israel? Who is Israel? Even the Israelites that are there that were kicked out, you have to remember, you have World War I, World War II. England takes over Israel, and England starts running out of power, or at least finances. They don't have the finances to even take care of home. And so that's why they actually started losing the edge over the United States of America. They're starting to lose colonies, finance, all this. And so they start giving away certain ones, including that's why India ultimately got freed, not because of the kindness of England's heart. It just became too difficult for them to keep paying to take over all of India, right? So around the same time, you'll see Israel go ahead and be released as well, but they were bought and paid for by the Rothschild family. Of course, the CIA had a lot to do with it. The FBI had a lot to do with it. More so the CIA. The Bureau of Investigation is not up and popping the way that they do now yet. But the CIA, or what would become the CIA, as far as what we know it to be today, they had a lot to do with that. The Rothschilds did, and those who are of Ashkenazi, wanted a place to be able to go and restart and rebuild and take all their money and wealth and stuff. And they even included letting some of their people die off in the concentration camps, but they got that land, and they said that they were the Israelites. So, in the word and just in period in life, lawfully. Remember, what's always lawful is not always legal. Technically, those who are in Israel now are not Israelites. The only thing that makes one Israel is who you come from. It doesn't matter where you come from, it matters who you come from. Who are your parents and who are they come from? Or, once again, if you're going to be grafted in, we're literally saying, okay, well, you're going to stop being of the country that you are part of, and you're going to say that you're part of this country to obey the laws, commandments, statutes, etc. Right? If not, you can't be Israel. You can't claim to be Israel. You're not part of the nation. What are the rules of our nation? What is the canon of our nation? Right? What are the regulations, the statutes of our nation? Right? If somebody's not willing to do those things like they would for anybody else, you can't call them an Israelite. You can call them by blood for sure. You can say they're born of Israel, but just because somebody's born of Israel doesn't mean you can't. Somebody can't say kick rocks if you're not going to do, like, if you go to Zululand and somebody's going to decide they're going to be in Zululand. If you're a girl, you're going to have your virginity checked, and you're going to have to learn certain dances to prove that you're a virgin. Now, somebody somewhere else might say this is unfair, this and that. True, that's unfair to you. Where they come from, that's what they do. That's how they're raised. That's their culture. So if you're going to come there and try to do anything other than, or even if you're born there and try to say we're going to bring in other stuff, I'm tired of what you guys tell me. I want you guys to do stuff like the West. They'll say, well, are you not Zulu? And if the person says, yeah, I'm Zulu, but I want us to change it, they'll say, we don't change that. And they'll ask you politely to go through the door. Right? So there's always a standard. That's right. There's always something that you should do. And if you're not going to keep the standard, in the time that you don't keep the standard, you're outside the contract, are you really who you say you are? You keep the standard at all times. See, so that's more important than the other stuff, right? That we're talking about and things like that. It's like, are you keeping? Are you guarding? Are you making sure the language is spoken? Are you willing to do what it says to the letter? Or are you just saying, hey, I want to go ahead? It's like even the term black. Black is a nation. So if you want to talk about being black, what does the black nation do? And there's a few nations that are black by the actual color. Not just by the actual color even, but I'm talking about by the actual, the name. If you study names of communities, then you need to find out what black culture is about. A lot of you are calling yourself black without actually being part of the black culture. If you're not going to be part of the black culture, then you shouldn't necessarily talk about being black, because that's a nation. Right? Persons don't get that, right? So we only adhere to the color. We like what the color. But a black person can have a light-skinned child. A light-skinned child is still black, not because of the color of their skin, but because they come from black. Right? Isn't like, for example, people say they were giants. A lot of persons miss this. Giants doesn't mean that everybody in the giant clan, in the giant household, everybody had to be, 10 feet tall. Let's say 10 feet tall or 7 feet tall, right? You can be 6 foot, like, okay, LeBron James is probably closer to 7 feet, but LeBron James is like 6'10". Don't believe the 6'8" stuff. He's more like 6'9", 6'10". Okay? LeBron James' son, Bronny James, submitted to the NBA, is 6'2". Does that mean he's not LeBron James' son because he's not 6'10"? Matter of fact, in LeBron James' household, he's short. LeBron James' second son, his second child, his second oldest, is about 6'8", might end up being like his father, 6'9", 6'10", might go a little over. Still in high school. Right? Does that mean that Bronny, the one that made it to the NBA, is not technically his child because he's not the same size? No. He comes from LeBron. Right? So the same thing a lot of persons don't catch is not every giant was in fact a giant. Right? As far as what you think all giants, but giant is the name of the person that the giant family came from. So whoever was the first giant, right, of that name, all of them have the same name. So many of them would have been giants. There could have been a few of them that were not. You see what I'm saying? So nationality is extremely different than what we think it is. Right? When you're of a nation, you're of your father's nation and stuff like that, and you're upholding things that your father upheld. The reason why they are giants is not only because they were tall. They were giants because they would also have lived how giant the first one would have lived. Right? That's how this works. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. Like, even some persons who live by different cultures, you're calling it different things, but don't want to actually be aware. You just say, well, my parents were this, so that makes me this. Well, that's enough as far as on paper to say, yes, you were in fact by blood that, but that doesn't mean that you'll follow the way, right? Doesn't even mean your parents followed the way. Your parents are Israel, or your parents could have been grafted in, or your parents could have been original. They could be 50%, they could be 95, they could be 100%. All that stuff could be true, but we keep on going through this, and we get to a place where like, who's going to be the one? Because if your parents were who they were supposed to be, they would have broken the generational curse. If your parents were who they were supposed to be, then certain generational curses that you still go through should have been broken, right? Because the generational curse is broken for and by those who are in the kingdom. If they're not in the kingdom, or at least not doing certain kingdom things, then there shouldn't be, then, right? So maybe they were in the kingdom for like 90% of what you needed, but there's a 10% that's held over that when you do some research, you're like, oh man, this is really bad. And your parents might not have severed those ties. So you have to know who you're from, even from a spiritual place. Who am I from? What do I take on? What are the things that are there? Prayerfully, that makes sense. I'm kind of going all over the place. But long story short, yeah, so Israel is a nation, is a nationality. And so those of us that are coming back together, that's why one of the biggest things that's happening is not only what is your bloodline and what is your DNA type, but also one of the biggest things that's happening is we have to discuss the law. Because if we don't keep the law, how you doing, Raphael? If we don't keep the law, we're not Israel. We're keepers of it. If we don't have a report to give that's Israel, an Israelite report, then we're not who we say we are. Can we discuss what is currently happening with the government, and what is and is not real? How is this relating to the word in Revelation? So we kind of already talked about the word in Revelation some. As far as what's going on in current events, I would say the same thing, right? Who's influenced by the Satan? What does the beast or the government do? What are the prophets or these religious leaders telling you and I, right? Same thing we just talked about. So I said this before, Israel versus Iran. By the way, I can't remember the guy's name, the brothers, or I won't say brother because he's a Mason, but the guy's name, so-called white man, please forgive me, I just don't know how to describe him, got the white beard, and he wrote the thing that you can see about World War I and World War II, and everything he said came into meaning. Then there was World War III. Now this person that say that this person, I forget his name, I'm sorry. Matter of fact, I might have his screenshots. I might be able to pull up some screenshots that at least have his name in there. Hold on, yeah, because I'm doing some research on him. Albert Pike. Albert Pike. Right, so he predicted what would happen with World War I and World War II. That's interesting. I didn't know when I was going to use this. I guess I could use it now. Y'all give me a second. So basically, Albert Pike, he wrote. Just to be clear too, there are persons that believe this letter is a fake. So, just like they say the Willie Lynch letter is a fake, and they say that somebody admitted that this person was actually the one who. That they were the one who faked the letter and stuff like that, and that they can't find any excuse. But I'm just going to read it, so to each their own, do with this what you will, right? I'm making this a point to tell you this out loud. But this is Albert Pike, ALBERT PIKE. We do know he existed for sure, so he's not a fake person that was just made up in history. He did exist. But this is what happened. So the First World War, this is what he said in this letter. If it's to be believed, and he wrote this in 1871. World War I doesn't happen until 1914. World War II, the United States of America doesn't get until 1940, 41, whenever Pearl Harbor happened. But it started, technically it started 1930s, but I guess you say like 36, 37, 38, somewhere in there. But anyway, this is what he said. He said, the First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia, and making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agentur, or the agents of the Illuminati, between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. Okay, so basically, he says World War One's going to be put in a position to where Russia is going to end up having the royalty dismissed. They're going to begin to get into a place where you don't believe in the Most High, right? And then and then basically you're going to have a place where the so-called Illuminati or these agents of chaos are going to basically try to tie the British or West, what's considered to be the persons who are mainly over the West, the British, from Germanic empires or from Germany, Austria, Hungary, stuff like that, right? Okay, which will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. Once again, there are persons that don't believe that this was actually something that was that he actually existed, or I'm sorry, that this letter actually existed. So take this with a grain of salt if you would like to. Then he wrote another part of it in the same letter. He says the Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascist and the political Zionists. This war must be brought so that Nazism is destroyed and the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. And then he also said that World War III was going to happen by basically what's happening in Israel and Iran today. So if you had not heard of him and you did not know that that existed, or at least there are persons who believe it exists, there are persons who have said that and much more to tell you what was going to happen. By the way, if he's saying this in 1871 and he's talking about communism, there's nothing called communism yet, at least not to that level, but he's discussing communism. There's no such thing as a Nazi. Matter of fact, remember, the Germans never even called themselves Nazis. Nazi comes from the enemies of the Nazis. Not saying that I'm cool with Nazis, Nazism, just making a point to tell you that the word Nazi is not even something that they would have called themselves, right? But you see, he says in World War One, hey, you got to get rid of basically anything that's kind of Bible based and get persons into atheism. A lot of persons don't even know that's how stuff is even affected today. The only reason, so if you believe, right? I'm not even going to fight with you. I'm just saying, if you're a believer that the Earth, or that persons went from the Earth to the moon, there was a whole thing that was done because the Nazis were, so not the Nazis, communists or Russia had supposedly sent, we're not sure, but supposedly sent a spacecraft to go around the Earth, to orbit around the Earth. And once they did that, America was trying to figure out what they did, and so they started doing some things to hurry up and try to say, okay, they went to space before us, we can't lose this battle, so let's go to the moon first. That's when JFK came out and started talking about going to the moon. Now, a lot of persons don't realize, Sputnik, thank you. Now, a lot of persons don't recognize and realize that this fight to make it look like, or to go to the moon, whichever you prefer, but a lot of persons don't realize and recognize and think about the fact that in order for this fight, or for this movement to take place to go towards the moon, they decided to scrap certain American ideals. What do you mean, Pastor Kofi? For example, Americans were supposed to be Christian, because America's supposed to be a Christian nation, even though when you look back at the times of America, a lot of persons are not Christian and they don't even know what's in the Bible, but what you consider to be a great American is a great Christian. Okay, so the Christian can't be atheist. The Russians, once again, their czars, their Christian czars, and even their really wacky, wonky version of Christianity was taken away. And over time, at this time, in the 60s, and stuff, 50s, 60s, you're dealing with, is not Lenin. I'm sorry, somebody help me. Who is in charge of Russia during World War II? I apologize, I should know this. I'm thinking Lenin, then I'm thinking Gorbachev. I'm skipping over his name. Stalin. Thank you. I see his face and the mustache and everything. So Stalin is in place, and Stalin has said everybody should worship him, and then he even had them put his pictures up and stuff like that in place of pictures of Christ, right? So they had broken that down. They had gotten rid of that. Russia was kind of like a really big thing. If that broke, then the Christianity thing and going into the Bible was actually easier to start chipping away at, right? So You get that in World War One. Then in World War Two, World War Two does what? World War Two says we're going to go ahead and take the Germanics, because England is a Germanic state, and Germany and France and all these places, Spain, etc., they're Germanic states. But what happens in World War Two is that basically anything that was with Germany, you'll see ultimately that Russia, Germany, France, England, United States of America, Italy, all these places who are the same person, so very close to each other, they're going to end up being extremely split through this war. So now you have nothing left over, or now there's just an opportunity for just straight chaos and for any kind of belief that is antichrist to exist in a government, right? And you'll have government like the CIA, you'll have government like the FBI. We don't think of these things as government, but they are. You'll have government like NATO, you'll have government like the United Nations, you'll have government like England, America, etc., making buys and making stuff with Russia, splitting apart and fishing out what countries they want and all that. Just like they did to Africa, they did it to each other, right? And so now you see all this stuff, and then you come out of that, and now World War III was also described by the same man who basically told you were going to see Iraq versus Israel. So there is some precedence. They're doing the same thing that they've been doing over and over and over again to try and get a certain result, which is to control the masses and manipulate the masses, right? That being said, also too, look at what's going on. This happens yearly. I just want that to be made clear. Every year, Israel and Iran go at it. Every year, the United States of America and Iran go at it. Every year, Kuwait is dealing with some stuff. Every year, Palestine is dealing with the stuff. All the stuff that they've made for you and I to try and be up in arms about. Matthew 24, the Messiah says, by the way, he says specifically, do not worry about wars and rumors of wars. These things must happen, but that's not an indicator that the last days are coming. But persons, false prophets, put this propaganda in front of us to get us to not focus on Yechashvai or Yechadasha'al, but focus on this war that has nothing to do with you. And then somebody says, yes, it does, because gas prices and this and that or whatever. I'm going to just keep it a buck, which I'm going to keep it tall, right? We've traveled cross country, up and down the East Coast. We've gone to Florida recently. We've been to Texas. We hit up, near Vegas. We were near San Francisco. We were near, we went through parts of Mississippi. We went through parts of Louisiana. We went through Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina. So I'm just here to tell you, outside of places where the gas is always high up, that they really not doing much to your gas. Right? But they know that they have you so hard strung that if they were to raise your gas price by 30 cents, you think that you're losing your mind, not realizing that they're actually just trying to get you to be into so many things and get so many different fights and all this stuff. You're not actually catching what y'all want. How you doing, Sister Iska? How you doing, Kimantigo? Kimon the Ego? I'm not sure how to say this. Please forgive me, but thank you for being on. Thanks for being part of the community, right? So a lot of persons aren't even paying attention to Holy Spirit, the Word, right? We're so worried about all this other stuff. So yeah, so you'll see when you get to Israel and Iran, this is something that happens every year. It's like when they talk about every year, oh my greatness, you need to get rid of cryptocurrency, and you sell all your stuff, and then somebody buys it up for cheaper. And so now something that was for the people now has become for, the Safeways and the shoppers and the Publix and the, like literally grocery stores are buying a whole bunch of stuff. Whole countries are buying up cryptocurrency, and you were told cryptocurrency doesn't matter, but these companies are buying them up. So, there's certain things they're going to put in front of us every year, and the goal is to get you to freak out so much that you stop having your common sense or your kingdom sense and start living in common sense. The third temple, as far as the third temple, we obviously see that there's persons trying to build one. There are persons who have said that they're going to try to build a third temple, and there's persons who told you what it was going to look like. There are persons who are devil worshippers who told you what was going to happen. And there has been an attempt to build the third temple. That being said, even the third temple being built, it doesn't really relate to anything that says that once this third temple is built, that's when Yahshua is going to come back. The third temple being built is not a sign that Israel is coming back to. Well, I guess it's so anti-Christ, we should consider it to be something like that's coming back. But the third temple, as far as building an actual physical temple, the Bible never says that. The Bible actually says you are the temple, right? So we, the body, are the temple, or we have we should focus on ourselves as far as a temple. So the temple, the place of sacrifice, the place that only the high priest should be able to get to, the place where blood is put on the altar, the place where the holy days should take place, all these things that come from our heart, our love, our passion, right? So that's more so what we should focus on. So the third temple and persons wanting to build one is real, right? Don't get it twisted. It is something that we should take a look at and make sure we don't align with. That being said, though, it has nothing to do with us as far as our nation, and we would never, at least as far as the word says, we haven't gotten any word to say that we should build a third one, right? There's only really one temple in the Bible that was ever really, I mean, you could say technically two or maybe even three, but they were dealing with the same temple or pieces of the temple and rebuilding it. We're talking about Maccabees, if you're talking about, the weeping prophet and stuff like that, and going back and stuff like that, and eventually getting to where the temple is rebuilt, or if you're talking about the actual temple that was built by Solomon, that Solomon's temple is the only one that was ever really said by the Most High, you're allowed to build the temple. The other ones were repaired. Even in Maccabees, McClub, even in Maccabees, it's repairs done, and it's something that's done to revitalize. But Herod's temple never doesn't qualify as a temple. Although there were persons who still did sacrifices, and even Yehoshua came through. But when he saw them doing things in the temple that weren't allowed in his temple, right? He flipped over tables. He said that it was wrong. He corrected scriptures that were taken out of context. But the only temple that really was ever allowed by Yah was Solomon's temple. Any other temple anybody's really trying to construct is something that's outside the will of Yah. So we don't really put too much more effort into it. Doesn't mean that we can't study and learn things about it. I'm just saying we really, as a nation, don't put that much into it outside of that, because it's just a sign that somebody's doing wickedness. It has nothing to do with me. It's a false temple. It's false worship. It's idols. And then if you look at the stuff they've been putting in, some of this stuff trying to make a new temple, they're bringing some of the stuff from the Roman Catholic Church that is a snake, serpent and all this stuff. And you're seeing a lot of stuff that, it's not just only Christianity making a new temple. They're trying to do Judaism, Christianity, and being Muslim, Buddhist, a lot of different belief systems coming together and everybody supposedly being one. And that's something the Bible does tell us to watch for, because it's a sign of what time we're in, but it has nothing to do with, inhibiting our worship, unless we allow it to, if that makes sense. Alrighty. Another question. And somebody asked me a question about head coverings for women, and you gave me a bunch of chapters and verses. I could answer it real quickly, but since we're doing Q&A today and tomorrow, I will answer that one tomorrow. Let me go ahead and get to this question though. In the garden, Adam wasn't tempted directly by the serpent. I've been wondering if that's because Adam was in his work, walking fully in the assignment the Most High gave him, so the enemy couldn't even get in to test him. But when it came to Eve, the serpent was able to approach her and cause her to disobey. Could it be that Eve was not fully in her work at the moment, and maybe she was in idle time, which left her vulnerable to the enemy's deception? Was it the fact that Adam was in his assignment that made him untouchable, and Eve being outside of hers that made her open to temptation? Very excellent question. I've never been asked the Adam Eve question in that fashion before. So, very great question. Thank you for the question. I'm going to attempt to answer the question as best as I can. I just started looking into that this rising, even though you gave it to me, I believe yesterday, or maybe it was, or actually it was another time, but yeah. So great question. So once again, so the question is different. This time it's basically Adam was in his work. So since Adam was in his work, he couldn't really be. This is just the question. So is it possible that Adam being in his work, he couldn't be approached by the devil, because since he was in his work, the devil really couldn't approach him? But when Eve, so-called Eve, right, because it's Adam Ayazar, but let's call her Eve. So when Eve comes into this place, she's approached in a certain manner, right? And since she's approached in a certain manner, whatever, it must maybe she was not in her work, or maybe she was idle, but it was hard to get to Adam because he was in the work. His work was to protect Eve. So there's a couple things that we have to do. So number one, I want to make sure that we put this in here when I started studying and looking into this before we got on today. I want to make this very clear and make sure that we catch this. How you doing, Jimbo? How you doing? Is it Libras? Thank you for being part of the community. How you doing, Brother Brandon? So that's a great question. Number one, there's a couple of assumptions that I want to go ahead and break through real quick, because whenever we ask a question, it's not about you. I'm just saying, whenever we ask a question, you have to look for what one assumes in order to make that question work, right? So we have to assume that Adam could not be approached by the devil, and that's not necessarily the case. By the way, if one was approached, the other was approached. If you're married, you must catch this. You two are one. If somebody comes at my wife, they come at me. If somebody comes at me, they come at my wife. If the Satan influences or tries to send somebody to influence my wife, he's done so to me. And so I would fight against it as if somebody was coming at me, because if somebody's coming at me, they're also coming at my wife, they're coming at my family, coming at my child, they're coming at my nation. Right? If your man is covering you, how can a serpent who speaks beguile you? Well, so once again, so as I'm getting into this, we first had to get to a place where we realize, we say, did Adam fall short? Or was Adam not gotten that? And number one, if he came to Eve, if the serpent came to Eve, the serpent, no matter if Adam was right next to her or was on some other place in the garden or whatever, if the serpent came at Eve, he came at Adam. So you always got to think about this as two becoming one, or two are one, right? If the serpent came to Adam, or he would have came to Eve. If he came to Eve, he came to Adam, right? And by the way, Adam has a chance, but we don't know for sure how it would have turned out. But Adam has a chance for repentance, and he has a chance to chastise even his own wife. He had a responsibility to. He was her covering. So Adam could have said, Eve, what have you done? We should not have this fruit. You know that to eat of this fruit means we would surely die. You know what? I'm going to ask y'all, I'm going to pray for you. We're going to go to Holy Spirit. He still has access to speak to Holy Spirit, has Holy Spirit in him at this time. Hey, Holy Spirit, what should I do about this? Eve, though, she comes to him and gives him the fruit. Adam eats the fruit as well. Right? He could have covered his wife. He could have washed her with water by the word. He could have done, but he just ate the fruit. For whatever reason, whether we want to say he was just inundated by her, she was so sexy, he finally had to help me, he was afraid to go against her, whatever. But Adam made a choice, and he decided to go down into this place of iniquity, into this place of achiva, or evil. Remember, iniquity, sin, iniquity is achiva, or evil. So to be unrighteous, to not follow the law, to not be in right lawful standing, is to do evil. His wife had done evil, and he could have said, I will stay in righteousness, and let's see how y'all will deal with it. Or he could have just moved. And he decided to just move. Right? He just decided to go impulse. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe he thought it through. We don't really have all the details on that. We just know he made a decision. And he was first. And he was the head. So once he made a decision, so we have to first look at this and admit and say, well, Adam is not here to be looked at as one who's without sin. Because Adam clearly sinned. Once him and her ate of the fruit, then it says consequences came. But when she had ate of the fruit by herself, there were no consequences, were there? Not saying that there couldn't have been. Not saying that y'all wouldn't have given her some kind of consequence and that be it. But there were no consequences until both of them eat of the fruit. Right? So both were wrong, number one. We had to go there, right? So, and by the way, I wanted to talk about that to open up to something else. That just because one is in their work does not mean that they cannot be tempted. Because even if Eve was idle, if that's the question, maybe it could have because she was idle. We don't know that, by the way. We don't know what the situation was. We don't know where they were exactly outside of being in the garden. We don't know what was going on. We just know that she was gotten or had a conversation with the serpent, the devil. Now, there's something to be said for that, where, hey, we, no matter what we're dealing with, you can be in your work and still be tempted. Matter of fact, to be tempted is not even really the work of the devil as much as it is something that's necessary to see where you are. So the devil can be allowed to tempt you, but it says that Yah will never lead you into temptation. Temptation is when you have fallen for being tempted and now you are dealing with the consequence. That's what temptation actually means, right? T-I-O-N on the word makes it a noun, a person, place, a thing. To tempt, you tempt gold. You go through the action of seeing, is the gold usable? Does the gold have dirt inside of it? Can we utilize this gold? Can we operate in this gold? Can this gold last? Is it too soft? Is it too hard? Whatever. Gold is tempted in order to even make gold bars. Gold is tempted in order to become the ring on your finger. It has to be tested or tempted. If it's not tempted, we will not know the value of it. Right? Gold is, in a sense, tempted when you look at the value of it. You said being the first man on earth, did he understand what his role was? He did, according to the word, because we can go do this. Remember, he is Adam. Adam is given work already, and he was created specifically to do the work or be in the occupation. Remember, this word work means occupation. So he was put in the occupation of the Most High. The occupation was of the Most High. He was creating everything, watching over the earth. Then he rests. And when he rests, he puts together Adam. Adam now is given work, the works of Yah. The same thing that Yah would have done is now the works that Adam does. Adam in his work sees the necessity and the value of an ayazar or a helpmeet. Once he comes into this agreement with Yah that he would need a helpmeet, Yah has him rest, just like Yah rested. Now he has Adam rest, and out of Adam's rest, out of his loins, comes ayazar, helpmeet. Before she was called woman and all the stuff we talk about, she was called helpmeet. So now Adam, right, and helpmeet, or what we call man, right, or male, or person, or humanity, human, is now with helpmeet. And helpmeet and human come together, right, so that human might be multiplied, and that helpmeet might be able to help human to become something that he could never become within himself. Therefore, what is a human, or what is man, or what is Adam without ayazar, without helpmeet? By the way, he needs to be one with her, because when he had her taken out of him, although he had everything within himself, he could not multiply, he could not necessarily replenish the way he was supposed to. So therefore, out of him comes the very thing that helps him to do what Yah has called him to do, which is to become fruitful, multiply, replenish, and now he can actually subdue things on the earth. Right? So he knows all these things going in. And this is why when he awakes from the slumber, right, and the surgery, and comes out of that anesthesia, if you will, he looks over and he sees ayazar. He sees helpmeet. And then he changes their name. He gives them he'll change their name, he gives them titles. Where it says, for this cause should a man leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, it actually would have said, for this cause will a Aish or Ish, a husband, leave his Abba, his mother and father, and cleave to his Aishah or Isha or wife. Right? So now he's saying, I recognize what Yah has done, and I give us this title of husband and wife. For this cause, anybody who's husband and wife will cleave, right? A husband will always leave his family and cleave to his wife. They will become one flesh. Anybody who is of Adam who gets married, anybody who is Adam kind, anybody who is mankind, he says that if you are going to be in a marriage, you must have the ability to make sure that your husband or your wife comes first. You two are one. You are nothing without that person that's missing. Make sure that you're there. If you're going to be a wife of the Most High, you should recognize the relationship. Right? Same thing. He's saying anybody who's of me, who's really Adam, anybody who's going to be Adam, when you have this person you are becoming one with, you are a husband or a wife, and you must leave your mother and father if necessary. If necessary, I'm not saying everybody leave your mother and father behind, but I'm saying they don't come before your spouse. You cleave to your spouse. You have relations with your spouse. You have children with your spouse. You make sure you pass on the word and stuff to your spouse. You can do so with your parents, but your children are the ones that you focus on, out of two becoming one, to make sure that, yes, things of the past can go forward from your parents, but also there might be generational curses and things might need to be cut off. You two are making sure you're coming into the nation of Israel and what we think of marriage and what the Most High has said marriage is. Right? So the law is initially given to Adam. And Adam did tell his wife the law, because she takes the law and says it to the serpent. Right? But that being said, we have to recognize and realize, so the two are one. What happens to one happens to the other. That's why if one can remain obedient even when the other one's out, if you can remain obedient, you can still cover your spouse. You can't cover your spouse by being disobedient. So if your husband goes and does something and you know it's against the will of Yah, you got to stand still, palm tree. You might be able to bend over in stormy times and grab him in prayer and stuff and cover him while he's going somewhere, or your prayers might stop him from fighting somebody, but you palm tree, right? Tamar, you're in a position where somebody got to stay in righteousness while everybody out here being disobedient, right? So, or as a husband, if your wife decides that she wants to submit to some other mission that's not the mission of the Most High, especially the one that's been given your family, like somebody got to stand in position and say, hey, we don't do that. We're not going that route. That's not righteous. That's not cool. There are times where, yes, I have to go ahead and respect blah, 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 as a spouse, but also as a spouse, there's times where you have to say, look, y'all first. Because if we don't do y'all first, then it's going to be, that's going to be detrimental down the road. So, yes, Adam and Eve came together, but yes, Adam was aware of the law. Adam knew these things. Adam would have been aware of what was happening. That's why when Adam eats of the fruit, both get punished. If the Most High was like, well, Adam didn't know, right, then he would have maybe even said so, or he would have given a pass. Well, you guys did mess up, but you can go ahead and I'll just ask, but once again, what Yah says is his law, and he gives it to us perfectly. He also gives it to us even through Ravach HaKodash. She gives it to us in a manner in which is very clear. She speaks to each one even as individuals, right? So anyways, I'll leave that there, right? But prayerfully you got something out of that. So getting back to that, so Adam and Eve, we don't know if Eve was idle. We know that being idle can be dangerous, but we don't know if Eve was idle. We don't know for sure she was in the wrong place, but being tempted is something that can happen wherever we are, right? And Adam was not untouchable because Adam obviously had the opportunity. Once again, remember the serpent we just talked about, when the serpent is put in hell, when the devil is put in hell, he'll have 1,000 years to where that seal is put on him to where he can have no influence over anybody or anything. Well, just because the devil doesn't have influence over Adam, he had influence over somebody. And Adam, who knew the word, should have recognized it, even if he didn't even know who the devil was at that point, which we're not sure he did, right? But even if he didn't know who he was, he should have known this was against the word. Why? Because the word, right, some of the things that we knew clearly that he had gotten as far as law was do not eat of the tree. Here she comes with the fruit of the tree. At that point, you can say yes or no. He decided to go ahead and do it anyways, right? So we have to recognize that. So we have to recognize that just because, right, like she could have been idle, she could have been that, we don't know, but the thing we should get out of it more than anything else is that we know the law, right? This is why you should know the law greater than the scribes and Pharisees. We know the law for ourselves, and this should be the thing that helps us more than anything else. When we get into the law, and we are, from the Dominican Republic, how you doing, Sister D? Praise God. All right, be safe. So he knew the law. When we know the law, right? Even if we don't like to know it, even if we just know what's written, it is written, it is written, it is written, is better protection than I think, or what does everybody else know the law and live it, and you live it to a place where now, see, it also helps you. Now you hold the leadership more accountable than you ever have. When you know the law, you go, yeah, Pastor Kofi, but such and such says. And then we can have a better conversation. We can go up in the teaching. But a lot of persons, even persons who are saying, I want the law, know the law. Be intimate with it in such a way to where, hey, I live this too much. I live it with others. By the way, remember, that's part of the law. Let us not forsake the assembly, right? I talk to other persons about it. I'm under the law. I make sure I use my gift to serve. I don't just show up for service once a week or something like that, and then I keep doing the same stuff. I don't try to follow everything and try to put everything together. Like, I'm very strict and strategic in the way that I operate in law, and by doing so, right, you get to a place where you are going to have more, power, more righteousness, etc. things happening. If that makes sense. I'm sorry, I'm looking at multiple things. I didn't mean to trail off like that, but yeah. So I wouldn't say, even though that is an interesting theory, it doesn't mean that the theory has it doesn't mean that it doesn't have any substance. But I would say, just looking at some of those things, I can tell real quick that yes, we don't know. Adam might have been in his work, but that doesn't mean he wasn't tempted, because he was. And Eve doesn't mean she was idle. But even idle or working or not, you can still be tempted. And the goal is to make sure that the devil came in and does what he oftentimes does. The devil comes in and he says, what about your work? Right? The devil comes in and is like, what about your work? Or I'm sorry, what about your faith? And then what about that faith actually works? He deals with works more than anybody thinks he does too, because he knows that works is going to imply what your faith is, and that's how he gets people confused. And so he'll say, this is what you should have faith in. And he goes, yeah, why is it that you're not eating of the fruit? He doesn't say Elohim doesn't exist. He goes, oh, well, people say Elohim, is Elohim, but he knows that you can be Elohim too. You can be Elohim Shaddai. You can be your own provider. You can know what's righteous and what's not. You can make up your own mind. See, the way it reads in English, it kind of even comes across, and the way we've been taught for so long, it even comes across like, oh, they wanted to just be Elohim. But really, the thing that's there is, well, why is it that he should know what you don't know? Why is it? And the answer became, once you got from under his protection, you realize really quickly you're not even competent enough. You don't have the power. You don't have the ability to carry what he can carry. That's really more so they lost Holy Spirit. When they lost Holy Spirit, they realized their nakedness. Right? Then all of a sudden they were embarrassed even to be around each other. They just wanted to be one. Adam couldn't wait to be with his wife. He said, for this cause shall mother and father leave their mother, or for this cause shall a man leave his mother and father, or a husband leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife. Now all of a sudden here comes Adam. And Adam, now that they've ate of the fruit, and he's been disobedient, now the person he couldn't wait to forsake all others for is the person that he says, it was the woman you gave me. Throw her under the bus. He's the one that now carries around this curse that when his wife is looking for him to give him the same attention that he gave her initially, now he'll use that to be able to rule over her in a negative fashion. You see? So that's more so what we should catch out of that. But as far as, was that the case? Was it that he was in his work and she was idle? I mean, I could see where we get that from. I can't discount it and say there's zero probability, but we just don't have anything to say, yes, that happened, or no, it didn't happen, if that makes sense. Last one for today. We'll be doing Q&A tomorrow, so please feel free, ma'am, sir, to, if you would like to go and go online and try and find, the places that we have where you can go ahead and put your questions in and things of that nature. We'll try to get to them again. And we ask for you guys to look at the schedule if you get a chance to tonight. Above all, I'm not sure about the Hebrew characters. I'll look it up. But the Hebrew characters is more so for hashtag SOC University. I'm not sure if that's tonight or tomorrow. If it is tonight, it'll be at 7 p.m. New York time. If it's tomorrow, I'm not sure what time it will be. But for those who are joining us for session 5 of the 5 sessions for the grafting sessions, we're going to be doing that section 41 through 50 tonight. And so those of you who've been on Zoom for all of those, and we'll try to get the YouTube set together, but if you weren't on Zoom, as I was saying, I've been taking roll on Zoom, but I'll try to see as best I can to go through YouTube and see who was where, who was on what, or just contact me if you don't get any kind of message or anything saying you have in fact completed all the training. We've been putting up the pages as we've been going through them as well, so you can go online and you can look at the points and the bullet points. If you're coming, as always, we've been asking everybody to take notes so that you know exactly what we believe, right? But last question for today, I'm going to answer the question having to do with the head covering. Somebody gave me all the verses and everything. I read through them and stuff. I still want to do a few more things of study just to make sure that what I say is going to be 100% accurate as far as what Holy Spirit has given me. And I'm a little on the fence as far as if I say certain things, I still have this thing she's saying that I'm going to steer somebody in a terrible direction, because the head covering thing can become a fight really easy. So I'm going to be very careful with that. But the last question for today, we might go a couple minutes over, which we tend to do in Q&A. Thank you for being on if you have to leave at the top of the hour, which is like 3.5 minutes. Last question, it says, I keep hearing about Black Americans are Native, Indigenous, Aboriginal, just like all others have their native lands. For example, Africa, Africans, or Africa for Africans, Britain for British, etc. Why is it that most can't believe this is our land? Stop calling us African American and call us Americans, and all others their full nationality. What are your thoughts? So I'm just going to give you, I'm not going to opine as I usually say. I'm going to just speak as far as kingdom is concerned, right? I'm just going to tell what the kingdom states on this. And really, once again, going back to what nationality is. So yes, do we know that there are many of us that are Native American, or at least have Native American blood in us or DNA in us? For sure, right? And so, persons are like, well, there should be American land for Americans, and we know that the definition of an American is actually a lawful definition. It's actually a copper-colored person indigenous to the Americas. We know this for a fact. This is why you even have a Boston Tea Party where persons dressed up and who never confessed themselves or to be Americans. Now all of a sudden they're saying we're the Americans when they put on blackface, native garb, but the persons that they've skinned and all that stuff, and scalped and everything, and taking their stuff. Now you put on their color and everything, and you say I'm the American, and you fight as if this land is yours. Your land, this land is your land, from California to the New York Island, right? What is it, from the Redwood Forest to the whatever stream waters, Gulf Stream waters, and then they say this land was made for you and me. It's a very weird, perverted thought process, right? But if we're talking about law, once again, it doesn't matter where you're from. Thank you, Sister Carla. It doesn't matter where you were from. It matters who you were from, right? So an American has to be a copper-colored person indigenous to the Americas, period. If you're Aboriginal, that's even going into something a little deeper. But if you are an American by law, you are a copper-colored person indigenous to the Americas. If you are not a copper-colored person indigenous to the Americas by law, if you're going by their law, right, that's what they say it is. But nationality becomes something that's really crucial. Now, as far as why is it that we don't get it, first of all, even the persons who are in Britain are not British, right? Even the term British really deals with brutish, and that was something that the Romans were calling the so-called British. They were calling them brutish, but the Romans knew that they were Gauls. They were Germanic persons. It wasn't until French persons who were Gauls and Gaulish, but considered themselves to be better than the other Gauls, and therefore separate themselves. It wasn't until they would actually go in there through William the Bastard, who made himself William the Conqueror, when he offed half of the Gaulic Germanic population that was there, and said that now the Franks or the French were in control, and everything that became French became wealth, and everything that became Anglo-ish English, everything that became that was something that they looked down upon, right? That's why you guys would use certain words. You know, if you notice when you eat lamb, or when you talk about lamb is alive. Some of you say you eat lamb, but also some of you say you eat mouton or mutton, right? Mutton or mouton is for people who could afford to eat the lamb. Persons who just had to have lamb and have stuff for wolves and let them grow up. And the sheep, they didn't eat lamb. They didn't eat something. They ate what they could afford to eat. The lambs needed to live, right? If you're somebody who is into I forget what it is. Well, lamb would actually be veal, so I guess sheep would be mutton, right? But so you call it sheep. What is it? A cow is a cow. I forget. En français, why do you say cow? I'm having a moment here. But basically, if you look at the foods that you eat, the French names are when they are on your plate, and the Germanic or English names are the ones when they are walking around alive. Because the English persons that were still there, that became basically, you know, the lower level people, they couldn't afford to kill it. So you never it's very weird to say you're eating sheep, because the person who could afford to eat sheep would be French, so they would just call it mutton or mouton, right? But the person who eats sheep, right? So we don't even comprehend that a lot of nationalities, the British are not on the British island. The British were conquered, and so anything that you're calling British or English to this point are persons who were actually offed, and others have moved in and taken their spot. Just like if you talk about in Rome, there's the city of Rome. There was a people before them in that city. They were called Dacians, and they were offed. Nobody really cares about them. Their story actually exists on a post on the top and the bottom in Washington D.C. Something that's still worshipped as far as romantic values and taking over other persons. That being said, nobody cares about the Dacians or anything like that. The Romans came in. Right? Everybody talks about Europe. Europe is somebody saying that they belong to Rome. They're of Rome. Europa, that's what that means. But so technically there's no such thing as a European person. Europe means you belong to a people. You belong to Rome. But persons who just wanted to become Rome started saying, we are European. We belong to them. We were the slave. We were the Germanic persons who fought them, who defeated them. And so now we're taking on their heritage. We are the Romans. Right? So there's a lot of different stuff that goes on with nationality. When you're talking about nationality, so that's an issue within itself. But nobody's going to call these nations what it is, because if you did, you'd have to be righteous, and that means you'd have to give them, the land, right? If an American was actually still a copper-colored person indigenous to the Americas, that means that Americans should make decisions on their own land, should they not? You see? Like, if a Cherokee is actually a Cherokee, and therefore Cherokee lands go back to Cherokees, there's a lot of stuff in Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, Texas that has to change like that, right? If you're talking about even where a lot of our persons went to, if you talk about Choctaw, and there's a lot of persons in Mississippi all the way up through Illinois, that you got to change stuff right away. If we were to admit that Aztec is a made-up word, and Aztec was a place, but the person that lived there are the person you should look at, well, we know who those persons are. When somebody says we don't even know who the Aztecs are, yeah, we don't, because Aztec wasn't a people. Aztec was a place that some of the people lived in. Once you find the name of the people who lived on this so-called place called Azteca, or whatever they try to call it, then you'll be able to find out who actually belongs. So the same thing with us. It's not the land, it's the people. And if you find out who the people are, if they're given land, right, if we start giving out land, cutting this land out, preparing this place, pre-cutting, right, or recutting, redistributing this land, we're going to have a big problem, because you got to start saying, well, whose land is what? Who's the origin? Who's the original? And you get to a place where a lot of persons, I'm not saying nobody has an origin they come from, but what's happened is a lot of persons have taken other persons' places of origin, right? A lot of persons have taken other places of origin, right, and have now said that they are that. There's a lot of $5 Indians that if you start saying, hey, who's who, then they can't have some of the stuff that they have. Right? There's a lot of persons who say they're South Africans. That if you say, oh, well, what's the difference? Are you South African? Are you Dutch? Oh, okay. You know, we gotta have a different conversation. And we're just gonna be honest. A lot of persons don't like to talk about that, but that's why your nationality is important. That's why it's important who we have in belief system, who we honor, who we support, who we're with, who we walk with, who we decide to be one with. All these things matter, because we gotta have we have some interesting conversations to have now. You're very right. But you can't admit, like, if you admit that the United States of America is a corporation and not a nation, then that means that what power does the United States of America have? It only has power when persons give up sovereignty and sovereign rights and sovereign land. So if you don't think of yourself as an American and don't act and don't separate, see, here's part of what we have to keep working towards. We've got land stuff development, but until we get to a place where we can honestly all go, I wouldn't care if it, to be honest, if it was in a place on a strip somewhere, a strip of land, and 70 families just got a nice little 1 mile strip, and we said that's where we are for a second. That's obviously we're working on being more vast. I'm just trying to tell you, though, I'm trying to teach you, like, to separate, even to separate from values. And it was brought up earlier, well, we don't have money for this, we don't have money for that. That's right, because we don't set aside money for it. We don't have faith, because if we did, we'd have works, right? We talking about stuff like, yeah, we should have our own. Well, where are your works? I hear so many now. What I've heard from a lot of black persons is what I'm saying is problematic. You shouldn't set aside money for black persons because that's not going to help you financially. Well, time out. Yes, that's what helps everybody financially. You can't talk about finances, which is the distribution part, if we don't have the finances to distribute, right? Or if we don't have the wealth or the money. Or if it's not the money, fine. What are we doing? Like persons who are sewing, where are the clothes being put together so that we can put that in the storehouse? Persons that can make product, where's your product at? Persons who can make food that can, be freezer dried or whatever, or it could be just dried food and we can give it later. Where are those things? See, this is why it becomes apparent that we're not where we need to be yet. Because if we're talking about stuff and when a person can come for you, or you're saying I want protection and I want a place to be protected, well, guess what we have to have? We got to have protection. We got to have some of that thing. If you want to be protected, we got to have just bare minimum gates put up. We got to have at least strong tents. There could be strong weather. We got to work towards making sure that we have irrigation system and things of that nature, right? So if you have faith in something, you begin to work it. And the work of your faith is what causes manifestation, or the things that you do not see to become seen. For faith is the substance of things hoped for, that hope through faith being worked becomes the evidence of things that you have not seen. You've hoped but not seen. If anything, you've seen it in your hope, and you've walked in what you've seen. That's faith. And as I continue to walk in what I see, that begins to cause my works to give manifestation. So we have a position to get into as well. So it becomes difficult. It's not that it can't happen, but it's that it will. But we got to do it righteously, and some of this stuff is going to take time. So yeah, if there was a power outage right now, we don't have a power grid. But also too, what are we doing? To look. I don't care if you find an old generator on the side of the road. If you picked it up, if we got somebody that knows how to fix generators, that's a generator that we have. That it doesn't take that much for us to buy, that we can get. I don't care if you see old solar panels on the road, or go places where solar panels are cheap, or they're just free. Somebody trying to get rid of them. You start getting those things, but you have to have a plan. So we have to have this stuff planned out, right? Which is why we're going through the process, right? Our first thing is trying to even just get people to eat right food, because a lot of what's going on with you that's causing you to not live as long as what Yah has said is that you having battles about food, right? And if you don't even recognize how to physically feed yourself, spiritually feeding yourself is going to be problematic, because a lot of us are in the flesh. That's why I'm taking a lot more time out, right? To bare minimum, just make sure I'm healthy. I still can move, I can still do a little bit of stuff, but I'm getting better. And I'm trying to get a little bit of this to go down. It's coming down. I have my bad days and my great days. I'm still learning how to eat some stuff still for me now, for my body, and especially because I have a lot of bad stuff in me that still needs to be healed. But I'm taking time out to learn, because a lot of stuff that I'm finding out as I continue to eat better, I continue to spiritually get better. And even if there's some stuff that might be irreparable damage, I'm not sure if it is or not. But even if there is some stuff, the learning and the discipline of trying to get the stuff together is actually helping my spiritual journey as well as my physical. It's helping my son to not go down the path that his father is going down. It's helping my wife to prayerfully have things protected and stuff like that too, and to see different things. Right? So it's extremely important. It's extremely important for us to catch that and catch the cultural value and catch the national value in the nation. And we're not moving as a nation. One of the things that's going to happen at some point, beloved, is that we're going to have to become a nation. Even if you're not physically with somebody all year, even if you're only around a couple weeks, even if you're just there for holidays, even right, but even visiting each other. Look, too many of us in Chicago to not be meeting or calling or talking at all. Too many of us in Detroit to not be calling, talking, meeting, something at all. Too many of us in the Carolinas, as we just saw, not everybody could even attend. Even the persons that we thought were coming, not everybody could come to, right, basically let us know the day before the day of, and we still had enough to realize, man, we got quite a few babies over here. Man, we could have some fun, man. We could pick different things to do. We're not even that far down the road from each other. We could meet up at least once a month. Got too many persons in Georgia and Atlanta area, got too many persons in Florida, both east side and the west side, and central. We have too many. At this point, it's because we won't. And that's a disobedient factor. But the more we get together, the more some of these things take care of themselves. We keep forgetting the togetherness. The more that we take stuff and we say, okay, somebody's trusting in us, what are we going to invest in? Somebody's giving to my company, SOC's giving, Israel's giving, etc. Well, guess what? Then how dare I, if these persons are giving, they're depending on me and counting on me. The more we would talk to each other, probably the more we'd be able to deal with depression. Because we could actually talk to persons. My wife sent me a video. I forget the guy's name. He's supposed to be a very great psychologist, or at least does things in psychotherapy that are supposed to be great. And he was talking to a woman who has a lot of great things to say about society of herself. And she was talking about how she was messed with as a child. Last thing I'll talk about. She was messed with as a child. And in being messed with as a child, it said that she was, or she said that, obviously she went through hurt, she went through depression and a lot of stuff like that. And so he said, well, do you mind if I pick that apart real quick? She goes, sure, of course, no problem. And she's like, I'd love you to, because he's one of the foremost, therapists that you could go to. So he's talking to her and he says, well, what happened to you when you were a little girl? And she said, well, I was whatever, I was messed with. She said she went to sleep. She was at summer camp or some kind of camp. She went to sleep. When she woke up, there was an older child on top of her that was fondling her, right? And she said she never told anybody about it. And so the guy starts talking to her and he says, okay, well, how did you, and so he's like, how did you feel? And she starts talking about how she feels. And he says, okay, cool. Now, how did you, if it had happened to your child, if it had happened to your daughter, and your daughter went through what you went through. Peep game, right? He said, if it happened to your daughter, and your daughter went through what you're going through, and she didn't come and tell you, why would that be? And so she starts talking about how she feels again. She starts saying, well, I'm not going to talk. I mean, I'm a mother, so I would feel bad about it, blah, blah. And so he said, I don't know. He said, don't tell me how you feel. Don't go to, he said, I'm asking you, what does that mean? That you were a child, that you didn't go to your parent about it. And then she goes, oh, well, no. It was, it would be something I would feel some kind of way. And he says, no, you're dealing with the feeling again. He said, I'm asking a specific question. He says, if your daughter did not come to you and tell you that she had woken up in a summer camp and there was some person over her that was fondling her, right? He said, how would that make you, or what is that? Not how would that make you feel? Because she had talked about how it made her feel. But he said, what is that? And she says, well, I guess that's because my daughter wouldn't think she can come and talk to me. And he says, that, right? Watch this. He goes, that is the thing that's caused you the most hurt. He said, that's what actually you're struggling with in your depression, the works or the lack thereof. He said, you were a child and you did not feel comfortable enough to be able to go to your parents. He said, that's more than anything. Because he said, had you been a child, and you felt like the environment was one that you could talk to your parents about what you were going through. He said you could have talked to them. They could have said that was wrong. They could have cried with you. You could have hugged. They could have said, yeah, somebody was in your privacy. They messed things up. And then you guys could have had a conversation down the road. Hey, Brother Dennis. I can't pull up the picture, but if that's who I think, long time no talk to. Right? But he says that's the issue that actually is messing with you, is the fact that you had something happen to you and that it had already been a place where you couldn't go to them. So you walk with this place by yourself and never had a thought process of how can I get assistance from somebody. You didn't think that you could talk to anybody, especially the ones who are closest to you and love you the most. He said all the other stuff we're talking about is bad, but he said that's actually the curse that we should deal with above anything else, is the fact that nobody can get to you. Right? And so they had that conversation, and when they did, she goes, wow, I never thought about that. But he said, yeah, that's your issue. And so what I'm saying is we have an issue, some issues too, where once again, it's not just virtual, it's reality. We have to start working on how do we come together as a community and a society? How do we come together and not argue? How do we come together and have actual conversation? How do we make sure that if there is a beef, that we figure it out before it gets to a place to where somebody's cussing somebody out and the other person's like, I ain't even know you felt like that. Right? Before we get to a place to where somebody's in their 40s and 50s and they're like, you know what, the children are gone, you've never loved me, I've never loved you, let's go ahead and cut the relationship. And it's like, well, time out, I never even knew. You know what I'm saying? That you were feeling like this. And maybe there's some stuff we can do, but we're not preventative, right? So that's what I keep talking about. When we come together this time, because it's going to be it, we got to make sure that when we come together, we're throwing a lot of stuff out. We're not bringing in a lot of tendencies. We're not bringing in a lot of stuff with the flesh. We're not trying to line this thing up with the way it used to be, where we're doing this in righteousness. We're not taking new wine, this fresh anointing that's always been eternally new and never changed, but now in time we got this new wine again. We can't put this in the old wineskin that's already expanded as much as it can because it has a limit. This new wine, right, isn't something that's going to grow within itself. So that's one of the biggest things that's happening with us as a diaspora, and one of the biggest things that aren't being talked about is what is the intent when we come together? What are the laws, right? Not just what is your doctrine, no, what is the law and what is it that we're going to fight for? If we ever partner with IUIC, who does a lot of great things, if we ever were to partner with them, there's got to be rules and regulations that, hey, we're not going to go, well, SOC, IUIC. Either we Israel or we're not, right? There got to be something that we come under, right? There's somebody trying to talk with us about partnering up with some stuff in England right now. If we partner, for real, and we talk to them, if we partner, there's certain things that we're not gonna have conversation about. Or it's going to be, this is the word, this is it. Right? If we are to partner with somebody who's of a church or whatever, you got to realize, hey, whatever we partnering on, it comes to a place or a position of like, hey, we can't do certain things because we don't do church this. right? And we're not going to do what we're going to partner. See, so our partner with you might be limited. Might have a lot of love for you, but there's certain things that if there's sin, it's sin, and y'all can't look upon sin. So we have to get into a place where we're talking about power or structure. We have to get into a place where the structure comes in house, and we're a people who have been limited by that, especially by the beast and by the West, because we believe that our power and to come out of things and how we get our food and how we get back on our feet and how we get work and job, we think everything comes out of the system. If it doesn't come out the system, we don't. A lot of us don't even really truly believe or are not working towards what we say we have faith in, which is at some point I'm working towards not being in the system ever again. I'm working towards like if I do this correctly, I'm trying my best. Now I'm way off of this because I should have had this done for me, and my father should have had it done for him. But I'm working really hard so that when Solomon becomes 22 years old, he can do his own thing, right, and go and not and take what his father's doing and take it and do his own thing with it, his inheritance, right? And from there, be able to obey the laws and the regulations and standards of his father. And I'll be there to help him, but the goal is to make sure that I'm bringing him to this place, right? It's a whole different mindset, but we're coming together. And like I said, imagine this. Imagine with our children. Imagine with all these children, all these babies around the world, and they were to start coming together, living together, and their family's business becomes their business. And sisters don't have to worry about certain things because they'll always be under their father's protection, even when they got their own business and stuff, they'll be protected. And brothers who are out there, they're being sent out there, but they have an inheritance. And when a man or a husband, right, is who's qualified in our culture, finds his wife, it's a whole different thought process. But we have to start coming together. That's one of the biggest things that's missing. We're trying our best to do it virtually and make as many times that we can physically come into being. But that's one of the biggest things that's missing in our communities to this day is unity, is coming together. The more we do that, the more there'll be for us down the road. But anyways, we're way over time. It's Q&A today, so we let it roll a little bit. We might be slightly over time again tomorrow. Tonight, we'll see you guys for the live session, 1 p.m. New York time, or 8 p.m. New York time live session. Before that, at 1 p.m. New York time, we'll have Spanish class for the children. So I already put in the text string and in persons on some of you on WhatsApp who have children outside of the country. I already sent you a recording that'll make sure that they have what they should have had last week, and then we'll talk about that tomorrow, 1 p.m. New York time. We'll have that conversation and that teaching. Or 1 p.m. today, we'll have that teaching. 8 p.m. New York time will be the live session in the evening. I'm starting to call it a night start live. If you see that in the schedule, night start live versus the live session. Live session is when we get up. Night start, since that's technically the start of our day. The night live sessions, we'll have those on at 8 p.m. New York time. So we'll be on for night live tonight, 8 p.m. New York time, and then we'll have the sections 41 through 50 of our teaching for the Grafton session. That'll be tonight as well at 9 p.m. New York time. By the way, if you come on YouTube and look for the recordings for when we do stuff that's going to be on Zoom and also on YouTube recorded at the same time, just know that means whenever you see I'll be on Zoom and YouTube or Zoom, we always start with the music. So that means that we're going to have like 5 to 10 minutes that I can't record on YouTube, right, for legal purposes. So just to make that clear, if you come on and you come in and you're like, man, I'm waiting at 7:05, or anytime we say we're going to be on Zoom and recording it on YouTube at the same time, and you happen to see it on YouTube, just know YouTube is always going to be like 5 to 10 minutes late. And then the other stuff where the music and playing stuff like that will be on time. Okay? Maybe you didn't know that, maybe you didn't know it, now we know that. But anyways, I'll see you guys later today. Thank you again. For those who are in over in other parts of the world, I will do my best to make sure that we send you the link after tonight of all our Grafton sessions, and then that way you can listen to them however you like. Those who are coming live with this, make sure that we get your name and everything so that we can say that you checked in. And thank you all so much. So I appreciate you. I appreciate the malakhe in each and every one of us. We'll talk to you guys very soon. Thank you again. We appreciate you. Thank you for your prayers as we've been traveling and stuff. And we'll be on the road again in a few days or maybe next week, whatever it is. But ta-da, thank you again. Don't forget that we're still doing our intermittent fasting through Sunday. So Sunday at 6 or Sunday at sundown, however you're doing it, will be the last day of our intermittent fasting. And Sunday evening we'll be doing our prayer and worship service. as we usually do on the original Kofi_40 channel on TikTok. All right. So love y'all lots. You all take care. Continue to do great things. I will talk to you soon. Prayerfully, we'll see you sometime through the day. And if I don't see you until tomorrow or some other time, Tada, Mashapachi. Thank you for being Tzadaik. Thank you for being Tada, for being righteous. And this we give our honor and praise to the Most High. We give our praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Amma, who lives a life that's able to be honored. As always, you can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist. So at Bloom and Flourish, except on YouTube, which if you're looking for her on YouTube, what you will do look for her at is at Bloom Flourish, and I'll try to get some numbers for you. We have some numbers attached to that, but that's changing up a little bit, so we're gonna make sure that you guys have the correct name for YouTube to be able to follow her if there's things you're interested in learning, growing with her, etc. All right, so thank you all. Thank you for your support of us. Thank you for supporting SOC. Thank you for supporting each other. Don't forget about each other's businesses. Don't forget that soon the children will have to have sponsors. We're asking for $50 donation to sponsor each child. So if that's something that would interest you, let us know, or just send it. And when you send it, just make it a point to say that that's what you're sending it for. We're working right now and trying to get their stuff together. So we'll be ready by VBS, which is in a couple of weeks, July 21st to the 25th. Alrighty. Love y'all to life. You all take care. Continue to do amazing, outstanding, incredible things. And we will talk with you guys very soon. So love you again. Love you to life. You all take care. And as always, we give our honor and praise to the Most High. We give our praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Amma, who lives a life that's able to be honored. As always, you can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. And remember that you are loved, you're necessary, you're majestic, you're fearfully, wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shalom, take care, peace.